You ever hear your name in a conversation you were never supposed to be part of? That's how I found out what my family really thought of me. I'm Marcus, 34, and for most of my adult life, I've been the guy who helps. Quietly, consistently. No announcements, no reminders, just silent support, paying a bill here, covering a rent payment there, sending grocery money when someone forgot. There's at home. I don't have kids or a spouse, and I've done all right in IT consulting. So when my cousin Jeremy and his wife got evicted last year, it was a no-brainer to help them get back on their feet. I paid the deposit on a new place for them, co-signed the lease, even set up auto-pay for their rent so they wouldn't fall behind again. I told them it was temporary. They nodded like they understood. That was 14 months ago. Jeremy and I used to be close. We were practically raised as brothers, sleepovers, school runs, holidays. Our parents leaned on each other, and in turn, so did we. But as adults, we drifted. I became the techie one, head down, always working, while he was the fun one, hopping from one idea to another. A clothing brand, a podcast, a food truck. Every new hustle burned bright, then flamed out. When he needed help, I helped. Not because I was naive, but because I genuinely thought, if I were in his shoes, I'd want someone to believe in me too. Last Thursday, I gave him a quick call. Just a casual check-in. He picked up on the second ring, breathless, like he'd been running around. "Hey, man. Sorry, give me a sec," he said. I heard some rustling, a door closing, then silence. "Okay, what's up?" "Just checking in," I said. "Rent's due Monday, so I wanted to see if you guys were okay on your end before the auto-pay kicks in." He laughed. "Man, you're too responsible. We're good. Appreciate it." "All right," I said. "Cool." We hung up, or so I thought. I was still holding the phone when I heard a voice. His wife, Michelle. "What did he want?" she asked. "Rent check-in," Jeremy snorted. "He acts like we'd perish without him. Dude thinks paying our bills makes him important or something." "Seriously," Michelle said. "He's such a weirdo. Quiet, creepy energy. I still don't get how he got rich." My chest tightened. I didn't speak. Didn't hang up. I just listened. For nearly 2 minutes, I heard them make a game out of mocking me. Jeremy called me a money martyr. Michelle said I was emotionally constipated. At one point, he even joked that if I ever stopped paying, they'd just fake an emergency to guilt-trip me again. They laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world. I ended the call and stared at my screen. The call duration read, for minutes, 19 seconds. I sat there, stunned, in the same chair I used every month to double-check their lease balance before sending the payment through. For 14 months, I'd paid nearly $1,900 a month on their behalf. No questions asked. And this is what they thought of me? I wish I could say I felt angry right away. But I didn't. I felt embarrassed. Small. Like the butt of a joke in a room full of people I thought respected me. That night, I didn't sleep. I just laid there with my eyes open, remembering every moment I had ever defended Jeremy. When our uncle called him a failure, I defended him. When his mom cried to me about his mounting debt, I told her to give him time. When my own dad told me I was being taken advantage of, I said, "No, he's trying." The next morning, I didn't cancel the rent payment. Not yet. That would have been too easy, too predictable. I needed time to process this, to sit with the betrayal, to let it sting enough that I wouldn't backtrack when they came crawling. Because they would come crawling. I didn't mention the call. Not to Jeremy. Not to Michelle. I didn't text. Didn't reply to a meme he sent me later that night like nothing had happened. I just went quiet. I started revisiting the lease agreement, reading it more carefully. I looked into the terms of my co-signature. I ran numbers. I called a friend of mine who works in tenant-landlord law. Then I waited. Rent day approached. Monday morning came with the usual flood of work emails. And right in the middle of a client meeting, I got a text from Jeremy. "Yo, you good?" Rent didn't process. I ignored it. Then another. "Think something's wrong with the account. Can you check?" An hour later, Marcus. Michelle messaged too. "Hey, just wondering if there was a glitch with rent. Can you rescind it?" That afternoon, I got a phone call. I didn't answer. Then another. Then a third, from an unknown number probably using someone else's phone. By evening, I had 14 messages and 3 missed calls. Tuesday, I went for a long walk after work. The city was cold, but the air was good for my thoughts. I kept replaying that phone call over and over. Not just the words, but the tone, the casual cruelty, the condescension, the entitlement. I thought about how I'd enabled it, about how I'd made it easy for them to believe I owed them. I remembered Thanksgiving last year. How they showed up late to dinner without so much as a pie, but still managed to complain that the turkey was dry and the chairs were uncomfortable. I remembered Christmas, how I gave them a $500 gift card and Jeremy joked, "Wow, just 5 this year?" I remembered Michelle pulling me aside that night to ask if I could loan them an extra $1,200 so they could visit her parents in Florida. "Just for flights," she said. "You know we'd pay you back, eventually." Rent day passed. Then 2 more days. No payment. No response from me. By Friday, Jeremy sent a longer message. "Hey, I don't know what's going on, man. If something's up, just talk to me. We've always been honest with each other. You know I appreciate you, right?" I stared at that message for a long time. Honest. Appreciate. I laughed. Not bitterly. Not with anger. Just a dry, humorless laugh that came from somewhere deep. I picked up my phone, opened the lease folder again, and clicked on the document I drafted 3 days ago but hadn't sent yet. My hand hovered over the send button. Not yet, I told myself. Not until it hurts a little more. I was still waiting for Monday. Because Monday wasn't just any day. It was renewal day. And they didn't know I'd made a few quiet phone calls of my own. Monday came like thunder after a long, still silence. Jeremy texted me first thing in the morning, a breezy, "Hey man, can we hop on a call? Need to chat before the renewal hits," grimacing face dot. The smiley at the end felt like a slap. Like we were still in on some unspoken inside joke. Like he hadn't called me a joke to my face without realizing I was still listening. I didn't reply. Then Michelle tried. "Morning, Marcus. Just wanted to confirm we're good to go with the lease? Can't believe it's already been a year. Time flies." For exclamation points. Like the last week hadn't happened. I waited until lunchtime. Then I sent one message. "Hey, I've reviewed the lease and decided not to renew. I'm removing my name from the agreement effective today. You'll need to make arrangements with the landlord directly." Jeremy replied instantly. "What? Wait, what are you talking about? You can't just do that." Then, "Dude, be serious. Then, you know we can't get approved without you. We've talked about this." I stared at the thread, letting each bubble appear without response. It took him 6 more messages to shift from confusion to rage. "Is this a punishment or something? You're going to do this to us because of one missed payment." One missed payment. That's what it boiled down to for him. Not the phone call. Not the laughter. Not the year of quiet support. Just one missed payment. By 4 p.m., I got a call from the landlord. A polite man named Craig who I'd only spoken to once when I first co-signed. "Hi Marcus," he said. "Jeremy informed me you'd like to be removed from the lease?" "That's right. And you're not planning to renew?" "Correct. I'll need something in writing." "I've already emailed it," I said. "And just so you're aware, I won't be financially responsible for any unpaid rent going forward. That ends today." He paused. "Understood. I'll follow up with them about next steps." It was done. Or so I thought. At 6:37 p.m., my mom called. Now, for context, my mom is the kind of woman who doesn't like family drama, which is ironic because she somehow ends up at the center of all of it. She's Jeremy's aunt, but always treated us like equals. Growing up, she'd insist we share everything, even our punishments. If Jeremy broke a window and I didn't stop him, we were both grounded. She believed in harmony at all costs, which, as I got older, started to feel more like avoid upsetting the wrong people. "Marcus," she began, skipping the hello. "What's going on with Jeremy?" I kept my voice calm. "I decided not to renew the lease." "That's it. Why? You've been helping them all year. What changed?" I almost said it. Almost blurted out the truth. But I stopped myself. Not because I was protecting them, but because I knew how this conversation would go. She'd tell me I was being dramatic. That people say things they don't mean. That I misinterpreted. So instead, I said, "I just realized I've been enabling a situation that isn't healthy for me." There was a pause. "That's really disappointing," she said. "They're family, Marcus. You can't just walk away when it's inconvenient." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "Inconvenient? You know what's disappointing?" I said, voice still steady. "Being laughed at behind your back by the people you support." "What do you mean?" "I heard them, Mom," I said. "They forgot to hang up after a call. I heard every word. And I've heard enough." She didn't respond right away. When she did, her voice was quieter. "I'm sure they didn't mean it." There it was. I hung up. That night, I got a string of messages from Jeremy that bounced between outrage and desperation. "You're really doing this?" Followed by, "Come on, man, we're family." And finally, "If we get kicked out, that's on you." I didn't reply. Michelle tried next. Her tone was different, performatively calm. Look, if this is about something we said, let's just talk about it. We're under a lot of stress and maybe we said something dumb, but you know we care about you. I stared at that message for a long time. They didn't say, we're sorry. They didn't own it. Just a vague something dumb. I could have replied. Could have sent them the transcript of the call. Could have let the facts speak for themselves. But I realized something more satisfying than confrontation: silence. A clean, final silence. One they couldn't manipulate. One they couldn't guilt-trip their way around. I blocked both their numbers that night. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of a final blow-up. I wanted them to sit in the discomfort of not knowing what I'd do next. I wanted them to wonder, every time a payment bounced or a call went unanswered, whether I was listening. Because I was. For 14 months, I'd listened. I'd paid. I'd supported. And for what? A joke they thought I'd never hear. The next week, Craig, the landlord, emailed me to confirm Jeremy and Michelle hadn't responded to his request to reapply under their own names. They had 10 days to either requalify for the lease or vacate. That's when the calls started coming from other family members. My uncle, my cousin from Philly, even my dad, who never usually got involved. Apparently, Jeremy had started spinning his own version of the story, that I'd suddenly turned on them, that I was being cruel, that they were blindsided. They left out the part where they called me a joke. They left out the part where they laughed at my generosity. And now? Now they were running out of days and excuses. The first eviction notice landed on their doorstep exactly 9 days after my name was officially removed from the lease. A printed envelope, discreetly taped to their door by the building's management company, neatly folded and stamped, "Notice to vacate, final warning." I didn't know that from Jeremy, of course. I knew it from a neighbor, Alyssa, who'd once DM'd me to thank me for helping Jeremy when he and Michelle first moved in. She and I had exchanged a few messages back then, mostly about logistics, packages, building maintenance, etc. She messaged me out of the blue that Friday. "Hey Marcus, I don't mean to get involved, but Jeremy and Michelle got an eviction notice this morning. Everything okay?" I just replied, "Everything's unfolding the way it was always going to." Alyssa didn't push, just reacted with a neutral emoji and let it drop. That same day, I got an email from Michelle. Not a message. An email. Subject? From Michelle. "Can we talk? Hi Marcus. I hope you're doing okay. I know things have gotten tense, and I hate that it's come to this. Whatever misunderstanding happened, I'm sure it wasn't intentional. Jeremy's been under a lot of pressure, and I know he says stupid things sometimes when he's stressed. But you've always been family. Can we meet for coffee or something and just clear the air? We really need your help right now." There it was again, misunderstanding. And the classic pivot, pretending they didn't mean it, that it was some stress-related fluke. No acknowledgement of what they actually said. No apology. Just a soft appeal to sympathy. A reset button. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the email to my legal contact, just in case they tried anything further. I wasn't taking chances. I'd seen people twist stories fast when money was involved, and if they were willing to trash me to my face, well, unknowingly, who knew what they'd spin now? By Monday, my mom called again. Twice. I ignored both calls. On her third attempt, I finally picked up. "I needed to get this conversation over with. I just don't understand what you're doing," she said. No hello. No pause. I said nothing. "Marcus, this isn't you," she added. "You don't hold grudges." "I don't," I said. "But I also don't pretend I wasn't insulted when I clearly was." "You're being petty." "I'm being precise," I said flatly. "I gave, they took, and then they mocked me for giving. That's not a grudge. That's a boundary." She sighed. "What happened to compassion?" "Compassion? Mom, I gave them 14 months of rent. I co-signed a lease. I paid for groceries, utilities, Uber rides. That was compassion. What you're asking for now is obedience. You're asking me to keep giving no matter how they treat me." She went quiet for a moment. "I'm asking you to forgive your family." "I did," I said. "But forgiving someone doesn't mean you let them keep your credit score hostage." That's when the conversation ended. She hung up without another word. For the next few days, I got nothing but silence. No messages. No calls. It was eerie, like the calm before a storm. I knew Jeremy. I knew how his brain worked. He wasn't the type to sit still and wait for consequences. He was the type to flail, to pull others into his panic, to do something loud to create chaos and distract from the fact that he'd failed to take responsibility. Sure enough, the explosion came Friday night. I was on my way home from the gym when my phone buzzed with a Twitter notification. Then another. And another. Jeremy had posted a thread. A public one. When help turns into control. A cautionary tale from my own cousin. He spun it like a sob story. Said he'd humbly accepted help from a family member, but that I'd used money to manipulate and humiliate him. He claimed I waited for the worst possible moment to pull out of the lease, risking homelessness for a young couple trying to rebuild. He framed it like I was punishing him for setting boundaries. I read the whole thread 3 times. My stomach tightened, not because I believed anyone would fall for it, but because of how strategic it was. He used just enough vague phrasing, just enough self-deprecation to make himself seem sympathetic. And worst of all, he didn't name me, which meant I couldn't defend myself without naming him. And then I would look like the bad guy. It was cowardly, calculated, and effective. The replies rolled in. Wow, your cousin sounds toxic. Cut him off. You don't owe him anything. Some people weaponize generosity. It's abuse. Abuse. That word hit harder than I expected. I didn't respond publicly. I didn't need to. But I took screenshots. Every line. Every lie. I added it to the growing folder I'd titled Jeremy, just in case. Because here's the thing about people like Jeremy. They think a dramatic story will shield them from reality. They think public sympathy is stronger than legal accountability. The Twitter thread went semi-viral. Not viral in the millions of views kind of way, but enough that Jeremy got the little dopamine hit he was clearly craving. A few hundred retweets, a couple thousand likes, and a comment section full of strangers validating his victim complex. For 2 whole days, he basked in it. He even pinned the thread and added a selfie of himself and Michelle sitting on a couch with their arms around each other and the caption, "No matter what we go through it together." And for those same 2 days, I said nothing. No statement. No subtweets. No clarification. Instead, I forwarded everything, screenshots of the thread, texts, the phone call transcript, to Craig, the landlord. I'd already warned him about potential social media fallout and reputational slander, especially considering Jeremy's post made vague references to the negligent landlord who allowed this to happen. Craig wasn't pleased. In fact, Craig had been watching Jeremy for months. You see, what Jeremy hadn't realized was that during those 14 months of rent support, he'd made more than just enemies with me. He'd been consistently late on utilities, left trash in the stairwell despite repeated warnings, and gotten noise complaints from 3 different neighbors. He coasted through his lease because I was the safety net. The one who cleaned up behind the scenes, who made late-night apologies to building staff on his behalf, who offered extra payments to make up for his irresponsibility. Without me, there was no buffer. The landlord moved fast. Within 48 hours of Jeremy's thread, he issued a formal notice of breach of lease, citing both the public defamation and existing violations. It wasn't just about unpaid rent anymore, it was conduct. Defamation. Failure to communicate. And with me no longer on the lease, there was nothing left propping him up. I didn't tell Jeremy what was coming. I wanted him to feel it this time. On the 3rd day, I got another message. Not from him, but from Michelle. This time, she wasn't calm. "You need to fix this. The building is trying to evict us. Craig said you sent him your little folder of lies. This is harassment. You're obsessed with ruining us." I didn't reply. I blocked her instead. That afternoon, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Then I listened to it. "Hi, Marcus. This is Eric from the City Wire. I'm a freelance writer following up on a thread we saw on Twitter that's been getting traction. Jeremy pointed us to you as the cousin in question. We're preparing a story on financial abuse within families and wanted to give you a chance to comment." I paused the voicemail. "You what?" I played the rest. "If you'd like to share your side, let us know. Otherwise, the piece should run Friday morning. Thanks." He was going to escalate it to the media. At that point, I had 2 options. Sit back and let this ridiculous fantasy become someone's clickbait headline, or quietly, cleanly, end the story with facts. So I responded, not to the media, not to Jeremy, but to the source of the money. See, one thing Jeremy had forgotten, maybe conveniently, maybe because he never cared to understand, is that I hadn't just been paying rent. I'd also been covering their utilities, cell phones, Wi-Fi, all of it, neatly bundled into autopays I'd set up to avoid interruption. And every single one of those services was under my name. So I canceled them. Not maliciously. Not as an act of revenge. As a form of closure. First, the Wi-Fi. Done. Then their phone lines. Gone. Then the electricity. I gave the provider a forwarding address and removed myself as the account holder. The only one I left alone was the water, just enough to keep it humane. By Thursday evening, my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Marcus, what are you doing? Jeremy's voice. Panicked. The internet's down, the phones are off, Michelle's parents can't reach us, and now we got a damn call saying the lights are going off tomorrow? Are you kidding me? You're actually trying to get us thrown out on the street. You're a psychopath. Another message followed 2 minutes later. You win. Okay. You win. Is that what you want to hear? Are you happy now? No. Not happy. But free? Absolutely. That night, I posted a single message to Twitter. Not as a rebuttal. Not even as a clapback. Just context. 14 months. $1,900 per month rent. $230 per month utilities. $110 per month phone. $90 per month Wi-Fi. Groceries, gas money, ride shares, holiday gifts. Over $30,000 given without a contract, without a complaint. They forgot to hang up one day. I heard what they really thought of me. That was the only conversation I needed. I didn't tag Jeremy. I didn't reply to comments. I didn't even log back in after I posted it. But apparently, it hit. By morning, his original thread was swarmed. People had found mine. Compared timelines. Screenshotted receipts. His supporters turned on him fast. The narrative collapsed. A few even messaged me privately, apologizing for believing his side. I didn't reply to them either. This wasn't about validation. I wasn't looking for applause. I was just done. On Saturday morning, Craig emailed me again. Simple and professional. Tenants vacated overnight. Left a mess. Thank you for the heads up earlier this month. Saved us a lot of trouble. Hope you're well. That was the final closure. I never heard from Jeremy or Michelle again. I assume they moved in with one of her sisters or friends, or maybe back in with Michelle's parents, whom they'd once mocked for being too old school. Either way, I didn't care. In the weeks that followed, the silence in my life felt unfamiliar at first. No more passive-aggressive texts, no more guilt-tripped favors, no more late-night calls about emergency car repairs or sudden medical bills. Just peace. One night a month later, I sat at my desk doing taxes, and I realized that not having them in my life had saved me almost $3,000 that month alone. I laughed. Not bitterly, just freely. I took myself out for dinner that night. Sat by the window of a little Korean barbecue spot I liked, ordered enough for two, and didn't feel guilty. Didn't explain myself. Didn't feel like I owed anyone anything. As the server poured my water, she smiled and said, "Celebrating something?" I smiled back. "Yeah," I said. "Finally am. I'm Jake, 27, and if I've learned anything in the last year, it's that family vacations will teach you everything you need to know about who you are in your family and who you are not. For most of my life, I was the quiet one, the go-to-tech helper, the emergency babysitter, and the guy who always picked up the check when it was convenient for everyone else. I never minded, not really. I figured if you love people, you take care of them. But love has limits. Or at least, it should. It started 6 months before the trip. My mom had this idea that the whole extended family should go on a big vacation to celebrate her retirement. She called it the final family fling, like it was some kind of tour poster. My 2 sisters, their husbands, my uncle, 2 cousins, my aunt, my mom and dad, 14 people total. 15, if you count me. Which, apparently, they didn't. I remember sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop, spreadsheets open, comparing flight times and prices, checking resort availability. My mom hovered behind me, sipping coffee and talking to me like I was her personal travel agent. She said, "Jake, you're so good at this stuff. Just book it all, and we'll pay you back. Promise." I didn't even blink. I'd heard that before. Still, I went ahead and booked the whole thing under a group package deal I found. Flights, villa, transport. It was expensive, sure, but I figured it'd even out once everyone paid their share. That was my first mistake. The weeks went by. People forgot to send their portions. My older sister, Rachel, said she was waiting for a bonus check to clear. My cousin Liam said he'd Venmo me next week. My dad said he thought my mom was handling it. Only one person actually paid me on time. My Aunt June, who always had a weird sense of guilt anytime I did anything for her. I brushed it off. I always did. The closer we got to the travel date, the more things shifted. Little hints dropped here and there that didn't register at first. Rachel said something odd during dinner one night when I mentioned I was excited to finally take time off. Well, you'll at least get some rest, she said. I laughed, confused, and asked what she meant. She shrugged and mumbled, "Nothing." 3 days before the flight, my mom called. I was at work. She sounded anxious. "Jake, honey." So, I didn't realize there were only 14 seats on the flight. "What do you mean?" I asked. I think there was a mix-up. We can't find your reservation." I sat there, staring at my monitor like it had betrayed me. "Mom, I booked every single ticket. Myself." "I know, sweetheart. But maybe there was an error. Anyway, it's all full now." "We checked." I didn't respond. I couldn't. The silence on my end must have made her uncomfortable because she added quickly, "You'll get the next one, right? You can fly out a day or two later." No big deal. It was a big deal. I got off the phone without saying much, went home early, and checked the reservation confirmation. All 15 names were listed. Mine included. Same villa, same flight. I scrolled through the details twice, thinking maybe I missed something. Nope. My name was there. They had just removed me. Or lied about it. That night, Rachel texted me a smiling emoji and a simple, "Sorry about the flight. You know how things get." I didn't answer. I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch staring at the ceiling fan, thinking back to every holiday dinner where I sat at the kids' table even into my 20s, every birthday I spent fixing someone's Wi-Fi, every favor I said yes to. I thought about how they all trusted me with thousands of dollars and still thought nothing of leaving me behind. Then the next message came. It was from my Uncle Marty. A single photo, a stunning shot of the Bali villa, bright blue skies, palm trees swaying, the private pool glistening. And in the background, just barely visible, was a wooden plaque on the door that read, "Jake's room." My room, at the villa I booked, with my name still on it. I zoomed in, stared at it for a long time. Then the second image loaded, a photo of the printed invoice for the villa, including the note at the bottom, billed to Jake W. My full name, my email, my card. I stared at my phone like it was made of glass and about to shatter. I felt heat rise to my face. Anger, humiliation, something that didn't even have a word. They hadn't just forgotten me. They hadn't made a mistake. They left me behind, used my money, and never even thought I'd notice. And they were smiling through it all, posing by the pool, drinking cocktails in matching linen, captioning their photos with #FamilyGoals. That's when the email came in. The final straw. A digital invoice. Full breakdown. Flights, villa, catering, excursions. My card was still listed as the primary. The charges hadn't even posted fully yet. They were still pending. I closed the email, locked my phone, sat perfectly still in the silence of my apartment. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't even swear. I just breathed. Then, I stood up, walked to my desk, and opened my banking app. I hovered over the transactions like they were landmines. One after another, $6, $500 to the villa, $3,200 in airline charges, $1,400 for transport and welcome package, whatever that meant. All still pending. That meant one thing, reversible. I didn't call my family. I didn't send a text or ask for an explanation. Because deep down, I already knew it. They didn't want me there. They just wanted what I could give them, my organizational skills, my credit card, my silence. So I called the bank. It took less than 10 minutes. I explained there were unauthorized charges on my card, that I was excluded from a booking that was made in my name, that I had evidence, screenshots, emails, photos. I offered to send everything. The woman on the other end didn't need it. She just paused and said, "We'll flag the transactions and begin the reversal process immediately. Your account will be temporarily frozen to prevent further charges." And just like that, I watched it happen. One by one, those massive charges shifted from pending to reversed. My breathing slowed for the first time all day. But not because I felt better, because I knew what was coming next. By noon, the group chat came back to life. It had been silent since they landed. Now it was ringing like a fire alarm. It started with Rachel. "Did something happen with your card?" Then my mom. "Jake? The hotel says the card didn't go through. They're asking for another one." Then Liam chimed in. "Bro, we're literally at the front desk, and they're saying we need to pay the full amount right now or leave." The texts came in rapid fire, one after another. "They're not letting us into the rooms. Can you just call the bank real quick and fix this? They said the reservation's being canceled. What is going on?" And then a call from my mom. I let it ring. Then another. Rachel. Then Liam. My dad. All of them. I sat in silence while my phone buzzed across the table, vibrating angrily like it was possessed. I watched it, arms crossed, back straight, heart oddly calm. I didn't answer. It wasn't until hours later that the tone of the messages changed. From confusion to desperation. We're trying to book another hotel, but everything's so expensive here. We used all the money we had for this. We can't afford to rebook. Can't you please just fix this? Please. That last one was from Rachel. The same sister who sent me a smug emoji just the day before. Still, I didn't reply. I opened the group chat, saw over 50 unread messages, and muted the conversation. By evening, my uncle sent a message directly to me. No greeting. No pleasantries. We're being kicked out. This is on you. That one made me laugh out loud. On me? After all the planning, the bookings, the trust they placed in me just long enough to spend my money? I thought maybe someone would apologize. That maybe one person would say, we messed up. Not a word. Instead, I got a call from my cousin Olivia, the one who never talked to me unless she needed a ride. Jake, I don't know what's going on, she said, trying to sound gentle. But we're all really stressed and we just need to figure this out, okay? Oh, I replied, keeping my voice light. So now I'm part of we again? There was a pause. What's that supposed to mean? I said, last I checked, we excluded me from the flight I booked, stayed in the villa I paid for, and were sipping margaritas while I sat home. So forgive me if I don't feel like fixing your mess. She got quiet. Look, I wasn't part of that decision. Neither was I, but I sure paid for it. Then I hung up. The next morning, I woke up to screenshots from Rachel. Apparently, the hotel had processed the cancellation. The entire group had been kicked out of the villa. The new accommodations were nowhere near the beach and came with bunk beds. The airline had refused to rebook the flight under group discount rates. They were going to have to pay full price for new tickets home, if they could even find any. Which they couldn't. Because, surprise, it was peak travel season. The last thing I heard that day was a voicemail from my dad. And not the calm version of him either. The one I remembered from childhood. The voice that boomed when I broke something, even if it wasn't my fault. He said, "You've embarrassed your entire family, Jake. You made your mother cry. You're punishing us for a misunderstanding. Is this really the kind of man you become?" I listened to the whole thing in silence. Then replayed the part about my mom crying. Good. I didn't want revenge at first. I just wanted to be included. I wanted to feel like part of the family for once. Like my presence mattered as much as my money did. But when they showed me exactly how little I mattered, I decided they could feel what that was like, too. That night, I sat down with a glass of wine, looked at all the screenshots, all the photos, all the smug captions, and drafted one email. Just one. To the travel group. To the resort. To the airline. Attaching every receipt. Every booking confirmation. Every name. And that's when things really started falling apart. The email was clinical. No emotion. Just facts, attachments, timelines, and a short, polite request for a full refund due to being excluded from a reservation that was made in my name, paid on my card, and never intended to include me. I didn't even have to embellish. The evidence spoke for itself. The reservation confirmation, the payment receipt, the seating list with my name removed, the villa photo with Jake's room clearly labeled, and most importantly, the airline group itinerary with seat 15 marked canceled. I hit send. Then I leaned back in my chair, stretched, and for the first time in a long time, felt something new, power. By morning, the replies started rolling in. The resort manager responded first, apologizing profusely. They had no idea I hadn't arrived. My name had remained on the primary booking, and when the payment failed, they were legally obligated to reverse the group discount rate and charge full nightly prices to the remaining guests. Since the original payment was made under my account, and I had clearly been excluded, they would be processing a full refund and informing the rest of the group that the amount would need to be settled directly. Translation, they now owed the resort thousands of dollars, with no backup card on file. Next came the airline. A customer service rep confirmed my refund request was being reviewed, but they had already flagged the duplicate cancellation made through a different account, Rachel's, and noted the discrepancy. Since I hadn't authorized the removal of my ticket, the cancellation may be classified as fraudulent. I almost felt bad. Almost. Meanwhile, the family group chat had turned into a slow-motion train wreck. My mom had stopped messaging altogether, retreating into what I could only imagine was a mixture of guilt and passive-aggressive martyrdom. My dad kept repeating that I was overreacting. Rachel had shifted tactics and was now trying to guilt me into fixing the situation. Her messages had turned from frantic to syrupy sweet. Hey Jakey, can we please talk? I don't know what came over everyone. It was such chaos. This wasn't personal. You know how family is. We make mistakes. But we always forgive each other, right? I didn't reply. I was too busy answering a call from the resort billing department. Apparently, Rachel had tried to use her card to pay the balance. It bounced. So did my cousin Liam's. My dad's card was expired, and my mom's didn't have a high enough limit. They were out of options. One by one, they tried reaching out again. Olivia offered to cover the cost if I just reversed the refund. That was a lie. She was a 24-year-old aspiring influencer who still lived at home and couldn't even afford her car insurance. My Uncle Marty called me from a local number, probably using the villa receptionist's phone, and left a voicemail that sounded less like a request and more like a warning. I suggest you think long and hard about what you're doing, Jake. Family doesn't do this to each other. I sat with that sentence for a while. Family doesn't do what, exactly? They don't secretly remove you from a vacation you planned and paid for? They don't let you find out from a text message that you're not wanted? They don't spend your money behind your back and then call you the traitor? Funny how silence becomes a mirror when people talk at you. You realize what they're really afraid of. It's not that you did something wrong. It's that you stopped playing your role. My role, until that week, had been quiet, helpful, bank account with legs. But I was done. It had been 3 days since they landed, and now they were living out of duffel bags in a budget motel 2 hours from the beach. The group photo ops had stopped. The posts dried up. Instead of sunbathing, they were chasing Wi-Fi signals to plead for help. Instead of poolside drinks, they were standing in line at currency exchanges, trying to scrape together enough cash to get home. Rachel sent me one last text the night before their return flight. You really hurt Mom. She's barely eaten. She keeps asking why you do this to us. I stared at the screen, then typed, ask her why you were all smiling when you left me behind. I didn't hit send. Not yet. Because just then, an email pinged in my inbox from the airline. They had finished reviewing my case. And what they offered. That changed everything. The email from the airline was short, but I read it 5 times just to be sure it was real. Dear Mr. W. After reviewing your documentation and the flight records, we've determined that your ticket was removed from the reservation without your consent. Because the group ticket was booked through your account and charged to your card, and you were removed via a different contact, we are processing a full refund for your portion as well as issuing a travel voucher for future use. In addition, due to policy violations by other members in your group, their group discount has been revoked retroactively. Any outstanding balances must now be settled directly by each individual passenger. Thank you for choosing us. I leaned back and stared at my screen, exhaling a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. They didn't just refund me, they revoked the group discount. That meant my family, who thought they gamed the system by booting me off the flight, now owed the full price of each ticket. And with peak season markups, those tickets were double what they were originally. I could picture them now clustered in a cheap motel room, the smell of stale air conditioning and frustration thick in the air. Phones dying. Credit cards maxed. Bank accounts drained. They had no idea what was happening behind the scenes, but they were about to. I waited until noon. Then I finally typed a message in the family group chat. Not a rant. Not a screaming match. Just facts. To everyone who's been asking why I did this, I didn't. You did. You removed me from a trip I planned and paid for. You used my name, my money, and my trust. I just made sure I wasn't the one paying for it anymore. Enjoy the rest of your vacation. I muted the chat again and put my phone away. That evening, I went to my favorite Korean barbecue place, just me. No guilt, no obligation. I hadn't realized how tense my shoulders were until I sat down, had a sizzling plate of bulgogi in front of me, and nobody was asking me for favors. It was peaceful. When I got home, I saw that Rachel had sent me a voice memo. I debated listening, but curiosity won. Her voice was strained and on the edge of sobbing. I just don't understand what we're supposed to do, Jake. You know we don't have that kind of money. The airline's demanding payment or they'll cancel the return flight. Mom hasn't stopped crying. Dad's furious. Everyone keeps saying this is your fault. And I keep trying to tell them you're not like this, that you'll come through. Please just call me. We'll fix this. Together. She sniffled at the end, as if waiting for me to feel bad. I didn't. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for standing up for myself. because I hadn't done anything wrong. I just stopped letting them get away with it. The next day, I went about my life. Coffee in the morning. Gym. Answered emails. I even booked a solo trip to Thailand in 2 months. I'd always wanted to see the Lantern Festival. And now? Now I had the airline voucher to cover most of it. Funny how karma works when you get out of your own way. It wasn't until that evening that I got the call that made me pause. My Aunt June. She was the only one who'd paid me up front. The only one who never expected me to just handle things. I hadn't heard from her since before the trip. "Jake," she said, her voice quiet, "I just wanted to say, I'm proud of you." I blinked. "Wait, what?" "You did the right thing. They never appreciated you. Not once. I told your mom this would happen, but she wouldn't listen. None of them would. You've always been the reliable one, and they took that for granted. Maybe now they'll finally learn." I sat there for a moment, caught off guard by the unexpected kindness. "Thanks," I said. "Really? That means a lot." "They're stuck over there until they figure out how to pay the airline," she said. "No one wants to lend them the money. Not after what they did. They're humiliated. Rachel's been calling everyone." I nodded to myself. "Good." She laughed. "Honestly? Yeah, good." A few days later, they finally made it back home. But not without burning more bridges. Turns out, they couldn't afford to pay off the full-cost airline tickets, and the airline canceled their original return flight. So they had to book new tickets at a markup using whatever credit was left on their cards. They split into groups, some flying budget airlines with multiple layovers. My dad and uncle had to borrow money from a distant cousin they hadn't spoken to in years. When they finally got back, their luggage didn't. The group chat was silent. Not one of them spoke to me directly for a week. Then, a Facebook post from Rachel showed up in my feed. Sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who hurt you most. Lesson learned. Oh, the irony. I didn't comment. I didn't react. But I did make one small update. I went to my bank, closed the credit card I had used for all family-related expenses, and opened a new one, under a different bank, different email, and password. I changed every account, every login, every travel site I had ever let my family use. From that moment on, no one had access to my generosity. They'd have to earn it. Months passed. The holiday season came and went. I didn't attend Thanksgiving. I skipped Christmas dinner. When my mom finally called, her voice was soft, almost rehearsed. "I miss you," she said. "It hasn't been the same without you." I didn't respond right away. Then I asked, "Do you miss me? Or do you miss what I used to do for everyone?" She was quiet, then said, "Can it be both?" That answer told me everything I needed to know. So I told her gently, "I'm happy now. I've set boundaries. And if that means fewer family dinners, fewer trips, fewer favors, then that's okay. Because at least now, I'm not being used." There was no fight. No dramatic screaming match. Just silence. Then a small, resigned, "Okay." She hasn't called since. And I don't regret any of it. Because sometimes the real revenge isn't about causing pain. It's about removing yourself from the cycle. Walking away. Choosing peace. And letting them sit in the wreckage they built, without you to clean it up. I never meant to take over the cafe. That was never the plan. I was supposed to help out for a few weeks during my gap year, just until my parents found someone more permanent. But weeks turned into months, and months into 6 long years. I'm Liam, 28 now, and if you asked anyone in town who ran Delilah's Cafe, they'd probably say me. Not my dad, not my mom, not my older brother Drew, who lives 20 minutes away and shows up twice a year to take photos with his kids out front like it's some kind of family legacy. No. They'd point to the guy behind the counter with flour on his shirt and a pencil tucked behind his ear, the one who remembers everyone's name and how they take their coffee. That was me. I started small, sweeping floors, wiping tables, running groceries. I didn't mind. My parents had poured everything into that place when they first moved here from Croatia. The cafe was their dream, and I respected that. But it was crumbling by the time I stepped in, burnout staff, a tired menu, and maybe 5 regulars who came more out of loyalty than love for the food. I saw potential, though. I always had an eye for small details and a gut feeling about what people actually wanted. Slowly, I started suggesting changes. At first, it was subtle. Updating the chalkboard menu, adding a new sandwich special, putting on some soft indie music instead of the dated folk songs that made the place feel like a time capsule. The regulars noticed. They smiled more, stayed longer. Then I overhauled the pastries. Baked them myself using recipes I'd been tinkering with. Suddenly, people were asking for the almond croissants. Then the sourdough. Then the whole breakfast board I came up with on a whim one Saturday morning. My mom was skeptical at first. She'd always been more comfortable in the kitchen, working behind the scenes. My dad, on the other hand, seemed grateful. "You have a good head, Liam," he told me once, when I stayed up all night balancing the books and found a supplier that cut our costs by 15%. "You're helping us survive." That meant the world to me. But even back then, there were cracks. Whenever Drew came to visit, it was like I turned invisible. He'd waltz in, throw his arms around my parents, and say, "You know, if you ever want to franchise this place, I've got connections." He was in real estate, flipped houses, drove a BMW, had 2 kids, and a wife who only spoke to me when I brought up school tuition or daycare. My parents would beam at him like he was the golden child come down from the heavens. I'd be standing there, apron on, hands smelling like coffee grounds and yeast, and they wouldn't even introduce me as the manager. Just Liam's helping out. At first, I brushed it off. Old habits die hard. I figured eventually they'd come around. After all, I wasn't just helping anymore. I was running the place. I hired new staff, built an Instagram page that actually brought in business, ran promotions, created seasonal drinks, even organized poetry nights and small concerts that had lines out the door. My name wasn't on the deed, but in every other way, that cafe was mine. I loved it. Loved the early mornings, the smell of fresh cinnamon and espresso, the clatter of mugs, the low hum of conversation. It wasn't just a job. It was home. But there were moments, little moments, that chipped away at that illusion. Like the time my mom snapped at me for ordering more glassware without asking. "What if we can't pay for it?" she'd said, even though I'd already run the numbers and shown her the profit spike from the last event. Or the time I asked if I could take a weekend off, and she said, "But who will open? Not can we manage without you? Or you've earned a break. Just who will open?" As if I were a cog in a machine they didn't quite recognize as necessary. Still, I told myself it was cultural. My parents came from a generation where praise was rare and duty was everything. I kept my head down, pushed through. I figured one day they'd see it. One day they'd say, "This is yours now, Liam. You built this. We're proud of you." I didn't even care about the money. I hadn't drawn a paycheck in years. I lived in the tiny studio above the cafe, fixed the leaky sink myself, and used tips to buy groceries. My social life was basically non-existent. But I felt needed. Important. Like I was building something that mattered. That illusion shattered one Sunday morning, and it started, oddly enough, with a plate of pancakes. We had just finished brunch rush, and I was wiping down tables when Drew walked in, dressed like he'd stepped out of a golf magazine, button-down tucked into khakis, sunglasses perched on his head, expensive cologne trailing behind him. His kids ran straight to the pastry display, smudging their fingers on the glass. My parents lit up like Christmas trees. "Drew," my mom cooed, wiping her hands on her apron and rushing to hug him. "We didn't know you were coming." "Surprise visit," he grinned. "Thought I'd bring the kids for some of that famous sourdough." I nodded at him, gave a quick wave to the kids. "We sold out an hour ago," I said, glancing at the near-empty shelves. "But I can make you some pancakes if you want. Just give me 15 minutes. He laughed and said, "Nah, I'm not a fan of carbs unless it's from a bottle of wine," and winked. My dad chuckled like it was the funniest thing in the world. I turned to go back to the kitchen when I heard Drew say, "Actually, I wanted to talk to you guys about something. Do you have a second?" The 3 of them moved to the back office. I stayed out front, wiped down the espresso machine, restocked lids, rearranged the mugs. 15 minutes passed, then 30, then 45. When they finally emerged, my mom was dabbing at her eyes, and my dad looked like he'd aged 10 years. Drew gave me a grin as he passed and patted me on the shoulder. "Good to see you, little bro." I knew something was off. I could feel it in my gut. But it wasn't until 2 days later, when I walked into the office and found a manila folder with legal documents sitting open on the desk, that I realized just how far they'd gone. My parents had transferred the cafe's ownership, the deed, the business license, everything, into Drew's name. I stared at the signature line. My dad's handwriting was unmistakable. Under it, Drew's name was scrawled in that familiar, cocky script. I flipped through the pages in disbelief. No mention of me. No clause about transition. Just a clean handover. I confronted them that evening. My voice was shaking, not with rage, but something worse. Disbelief. Betrayal. "Why would you do this without telling me?" I asked, holding up the folder like it was radioactive. I've been running this place for 6 years. You said this was our family business. My mom couldn't look at me. My dad sighed and rubbed the bridge of his nose. You don't understand, Liam, he said quietly. Drew has kids. He needs something stable. He's family. I stared at him. I'm family. You're single. You don't have mouths to feed. My mom said, finally meeting my eyes. Drew has responsibilities. So do I. I snapped. I've been living here, working nonstop, keeping this place afloat while you two stepped back. I built the brunch menu. I trained every employee. I designed the new logo. You can't just hand it off like I'm some temp. We're not cutting you out, my dad said. You can stay on. Drew said he'd keep you as manager. I think something broke in me right then. Not loudly, quietly, like a string snapping inside a violin. I set the folder down, walked to the kitchen, took off my apron, hung it on the hook. Then I left. No yelling, no slammed doors, just silence. A week went by. I stayed with a friend on the other side of town, slept on their couch, didn't check my phone, didn't go near the cafe. I felt hollow, like I'd been sleepwalking for years and finally woke up to find the dream was never mine. Then, one night, exactly a week later, my phone buzzed at midnight. My dad's name flashed across the screen. I hesitated, then picked up. He whispered, Liam, the regulars, they're leaving. They said it's not the same without you. I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, heart thudding in my chest. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel tired. I felt awake. And I knew exactly what I had to do. The next morning, I didn't go back. Not to the cafe. Not even near that side of town. I just stared at the phone for a while, rereading the call log like it might give me some kind of clarity. My dad's voice echoed in my head. That strange mix of guilt and confusion. They're leaving. They said it's not the same without you. He sounded scared. Not just worried about business, but shaken. My dad's not the kind of man who admits mistakes easily. He's always been proud, stoic. So for him to call me at midnight, whispering like a man who'd just woken up from a nightmare, it meant something was falling apart. But I didn't move. I couldn't. I'd given 6 years of my life to that place. 6 years of early mornings and late nights. 6 years without weekends. 6 years of helping out without so much as a salary, just vague promises and pats on the back. And for what? So they could hand it over to Drew like it was a spare set of car keys? Still, something in me wanted to know. Not to go back, not yet, but to see. So that afternoon, I parked a few blocks down and walked by Delilah's cafe like a stranger. I stood across the street, behind a lamppost, hoodie up. The sidewalk was empty. Normally, around this time, there'd be couples sitting outside sipping iced lattes. There'd be chatter, music through the speakers, the hum of something alive. Instead, it looked gray. There was no music. The chalkboard was still blank. No specials. No quote of the day. I used to scribble in colored chalk. One of the chairs out front was missing a leg. The flowers in the planters were wilted. I felt it in my chest. Like watching something you love slowly drown, and knowing you weren't the one who let go, but they told everyone else you did. A few days later, I got a text from Nina, one of the baristas I hired 2 years ago. She was 22, in college, and had never worked in food service before, but she was sharp, kind, and fast. I trained her myself. Her message just said, I quit today. It's a mess. Can we talk? We met up at a tiny boba spot near the park. She looked tired, hair tied up in a messy bun, her black apron still in her tote bag. She barely touched her drink. Liam, she said, not even trying to hide the frustration in her voice. It's like they don't even know how the place works. Drew shows up for an hour, walks around like he's the CEO, then leaves. Your mom's back in the kitchen, but she won't take suggestions. Your dad just sits at the register, but he doesn't know the new system you set up. I tried showing him how the iPad works, and he told me not to be disrespectful. I stayed quiet, sipping my tea. They ran out of almond milk yesterday. You know how many people ask for that? A ton. One of the regulars, Mary, the one with the knit hat, she came in, asked where you were. When I said you weren't around, she just frowned and left. Didn't even order. That hurt more than I expected. I'm not the only one quitting, Nina said. Sam's out. Jade's on the fence. If Drew doesn't learn how to do a pour-over soon, the customers are gonna riot. She paused, then looked at me closely. Are you okay? That question. No one had asked me that in a long time. Not sincerely. Not without following it up with, hey, can you cover my shift? Or, by the way, We need to reorder oat milk. I don't know, I admitted. I thought I was. But I feel like I've been watching a slow car crash. And somehow, I'm still in the driver's seat. Nina reached across the table and gave my hand a squeeze. You built something real, Liam. They don't know how to run it without you. But that's not your problem anymore. I wanted to believe that. I really did. But the problem was, it still felt like mine. Like something I left behind in the rain. That night, I got a call from a blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. Later, I listened. It was my mom. Liam, it's me. We're very busy, but maybe you can come by? Just for a few hours? Drew has meetings. Your father's been tired. We're short-staffed. The regulars keep asking for you. They think you're mad at them. Maybe just come on Saturday? For brunch? You don't even have to stay all day. I replayed the message twice. She never said sorry. Just a quiet assumption that I'd come crawling back like I always did. I didn't respond. A few days passed. Then I got another message, this time from Drew. Hey, bro, heard you've been ghosting. Look, we're all adults here. I know you're upset, but you gotta understand. Mom and Dad just did what they thought was best. You're a free spirit, man. You're not the owner type. But I am. I've got vision. Structure. You're an artist. You make a great menu. We can still work together. I can even throw you a little percentage if you come back. Just don't be dramatic, all right? That was the first time I ever blocked his number. Something in me shifted after that. Not just sadness. Resolve. I'd been passive for too long. I let them call it helping out when I was doing full-time management. I let them say Drew needs stability like I didn't need anything at all. I let them take my work and hand it off like a birthday gift. So I started planning. Quietly. Carefully. But before that, I wanted to see it with my own eyes. The damage. The fallout. I needed to know how far the rot had spread. The opportunity came faster than expected. That Friday, I ran into Mr. Clancy at the farmer's market. He'd been one of our most loyal regulars. Ex-professor. Always wore suspenders. Drank cappuccinos with a sprinkle of cinnamon on top. I hadn't seen him in weeks. Liam, he said, eyes lighting up. My boy, where have you been? I thought you'd run off to Europe or something. I smiled awkwardly. Something like that. He peered at me. Place isn't the same without you. Service is slow. Scones are dry. Music sounds like someone's midlife crisis. I actually laughed at that. You know, he added. I tried giving Drew a suggestion, told him the ambience felt off. He told me, this isn't a retirement home. I haven't been back since. That night, I sat down and wrote a letter. Not a text, not an email, a real, handwritten letter. To my parents. You taught me that family means showing up. That hard work matters. That loyalty matters. I lived that for 6 years. But I'm realizing now that I've been treated like a tenant in a house I helped build. I'm stepping away. Completely. No more calls. No more favors. If you ever want to talk, really talk, you know where to find me. But don't ask me to fix what you broke. I mailed it the next morning. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. 2 weeks later, I got a knock at my door. Sunday morning. I was still in sweatpants. I opened it to find my dad standing there, holding a tray of muffins. Muffins I recognized. My recipe. He looked older, like someone had sucked the light out of him. I thought maybe we could talk, he said quietly. You got a minute? I didn't answer. I just stepped aside. He sat down on the couch, set the tray down, and stared at his hands. Drew's gone, he said finally. He said it was too much. Took the kids to Florida. Said we weren't listening to his ideas. Said the cafe was outdated. I blinked. He left. Dad nodded. Took your mother's SUV. Said he'd mail the keys. I felt a mix of emotions. Not joy. Not even satisfaction. Just disbelief. He was only there for 5 weeks. I said. I know, Dad said. I was stupid. We both were. We thought he could handle it. Thought you'd always be there, so we didn't have to ask. There it was. The truth. I'm sorry, Liam, he whispered. I think I always assumed you'd never leave. That we didn't have to deserve you. But the cafe, it's falling apart. Without you, it's just a building with coffee machines. I didn't say anything. Then he looked up, eyes watery. Please, just come by. Not to work. Just to see. I hesitated. My heart told me not to. But something in my chest itched. So I went. The next day, and what I saw made my stomach twist. The shelves were dusty. The pastries were store-bought. The staff? One new girl who looked overwhelmed, and a part-timer I hadn't seen in years. The espresso machine had a leak. The back window was cracked. The chairs were mismatched. But worst of all, the soul was gone. It didn't feel like Delilah's anymore. It felt like a shell. And then, behind the register, I saw a framed photo Drew had hung up. It was him and the kids, standing out front, holding a sign that said, "The next generation of Delilah's Cafe." I stared at that photo for a long time. And in that moment, something clicked in my brain. A plan. A vision. Not out of revenge. Not out of spite. But to remind them, and everyone else, who really built this place. And what happens when you underestimate the wrong person? I didn't sleep the night after seeing that photo. Not because I was angry, though I was, but because I felt like I was staring at a gravestone with my name erased off of it. That photo of Drew and his kids outside my cafe, holding that ridiculous next generation sign, hit deeper than anything else had. Deeper than the betrayal. Deeper than the handover. Because it wasn't just theft. It was revisionist history. They weren't just taking the business. They were rewriting the story of who made it. I kept seeing it in my head. Drew grinning in that pressed shirt. My parents beaming beside him like they hadn't just handed over everything I'd built and told me to be reasonable. Like he had been the one baking at 4:30 a.m. Like he had come up with the cinnamon oat cold brew that brought the line down the block every Saturday. Like he had pulled Nina aside after her finals and told her she was doing an amazing job. I lay on my friend Julian's couch that night, staring at the ceiling fan, wondering how everything had gotten so twisted. 6 years of my life. 6 birthdays spent behind the counter. 6 Christmases covered in flour and espresso grounds because I told my parents, "You two deserve to take the day off." 6 years without a raise, without credit, without acknowledgement. 6 years I could have spent building my own thing. And here I was, 28 years old, jobless, no savings, and sleeping on a couch in a 1-bedroom apartment above a pizza place that smelled permanently of burnt cheese. It hit me around 3 a.m. This was my rock bottom. Not the day I walked out. Not when I saw the deed. Now, the moment I realized how much of myself I'd given away, freely, stupidly, with both hands, and how little of it I could ever get back. But here's the strange thing about hitting bottom. Once you realize you're there, something flips. There's no lower to go. No facade left to cling to. No illusion to prop yourself up with. Just the raw, honest truth. And the truth was, I wasn't angry at Drew. Not really. I was angry at myself. For giving so much. For asking for so little. For waiting for permission to be seen. That's when I decided I wasn't going to wait anymore. The first thing I did was pull out a notebook. Not a laptop. Not a phone. Just a beat-up Moleskine I'd had since college. I opened to a fresh page and wrote at the top, "Start over." And beneath it, I made a list. Not a business plan. Not yet. Just a list of what I missed. The smell of freshly baked sourdough. Conversations with regulars. Latte art that looked like actual art. Trying new drink ideas and watching someone light up after the first sip. The energy of morning rush. The silence of pre-dawn prep. Creating something people came back for. Watching someone fall in love with their favorite corner of the cafe. I stared at that list for a long time. Then I turned the page. This time I wrote, "What I don't Mississippi. Being invisible. Being taken for granted. Being the helper. Living in a space I couldn't call mine. Being controlled by guilt. Waiting for recognition that never came. Living someone else's version of family business." That list was longer. It was the clearest I'd felt in months. Maybe years. I spent the next week applying for jobs just to get some cash flow. Barista work, catering gigs, baking prep, anything. I landed a part-time job at a new vegan cafe across town called Bean and Sprout. The owner, Tasha, was a former food blogger who'd gone all in on creating a cozy, plant-based space with a greenhouse vibe. She had a startup's energy and the attention span of a golden retriever, but she let me experiment with their menu right away. I started slow. Didn't tell her much about my past. Just made my lattes, cleaned up, clocked out. But on my 3rd shift, she caught me tweaking the layout of their pastry display. "Did you move the muffins?" she asked, brow raised. "They were crowding the vegan lemon scones," I said. "People reach for what's front and center. Figured you'd want to push the high-margin stuff." She blinked. "Okay, who are you?" I shrugged. "Someone who spent too many years watching pastries not sell because they're in the wrong spot." She grinned. "You want to take over display layout permanently?" I paused. "Sure." That was the first yes I'd heard in months that wasn't transactional. I started staying after hours, helping Tasha brainstorm specials. I pitched a summer solstice board that featured house-made lavender granola, coconut yogurt, fruit compote, and mini matcha muffins. It sold out the first weekend we ran it. Tasha gave me a fist bump and said, "You're a freaking wizard." For the first time, I felt like I wasn't just filling a gap. I was being seen. Word got around. Old customers from Delilah's started trickling in. First Mary with the knit hat, then Clancy with his suspenders, then the girl who always ordered an haute couture and used to doodle in her sketchbook for hours in the corner booth. They'd do a double take when they saw me behind the counter. "You're here now?" they'd ask, smiling. "For now," I'd say. Each one told me the same thing, in different words. Delilah's isn't the same. It's got no soul anymore. Eventually, even Nina came by. She'd taken a gig at a bakery down the road and was thriving. We sat in the back during my break and talked about old times. "You were too good for that place," she said. We all knew it. I didn't cry, but I felt something unclench in my chest. Like a knot I hadn't realized was still there had finally come loose. Around that time, Tasha approached me with an idea. "You ever think about starting your own place?" she asked, sipping her turmeric latte. I gave a half laugh. "Only every day." "Serious question. I've got investors sniffing around. They want to open a second location. I'm not ready. But you? You're kind of built for it." I looked at her, stunned. "Are you offering?" "I'm saying," she said, leaning in, "if you want to do something yours, I'll back you. Or at least help you find someone who will." I went home that night and didn't sleep again. Not from dread this time. From possibility. Within 2 months, I drafted a full concept. It wasn't Delilah's 2.0. It was mine. A brunch-forward cafe with a bakery twist. Open concept kitchen. Communal tables and quiet nooks. Local art. Rotating seasonal menu. A place that felt alive, like it breathed with the city. I called it Bruno's. After my grandfather. The man who taught me how to knead dough when I was 9, who used to say, "Flour remembers the hands that shaped it." Every detail was deliberate. Every choice was mine. We found a small space near the river walk. Sunlight poured through the front windows in the morning. The walls were exposed brick. The rent was manageable. I poured my savings into it, and Tasha helped me find an angel investor who believed in the vision. Opening day was chaos. The espresso machine jammed. A box of produce went missing. Our POS system glitched. But people showed up. Old regulars. New faces. Friends of friends. Strangers who'd seen the flyers or followed the teaser posts on Instagram. I stood behind the counter, apron on, hands slightly trembling. Then someone walked up and said, "Liam, right? I used to go to Delilah's every Saturday just for your sourdough. Please tell me it's on the menu here." I smiled. It's better now. A month in, we were breaking even. 2 months in, we had a write-up in a local food blog. 3 months in, we were booking out weekend brunch slots a week ahead. Customers brought their friends. Influencers started tagging us. I hired Nina full-time. Gave her a leadership role. She cried when I handed her the offer letter. Every day, I walked in and felt like I was breathing new air. The walls felt different. The light felt different. Because this wasn't a borrowed dream. It was mine. Then, on a quiet Wednesday morning, the bell above the door chimed. I looked up, and there they were. My mom, my dad, standing in the doorway like strangers at a gallery, unsure if they were allowed to enter. They looked older, smaller. My mom clutched her purse. My dad had his hands in his coat pockets. They looked around, at the art on the walls, the fresh bread on the shelves, the regulars reading books or chatting softly over their drinks. And then their eyes found me. My mom smiled first, tentative, watery. My dad looked down, then back up again. I walked around the counter, slow, steady. We stood facing each other, in the middle of the cafe I'd built. My mom opened her mouth to speak. But before she could say a word, the crowd parted, and he walked in. Drew, tanned, sunglasses pushed up on his head, grinning like he had tickets to a show. He looked around, nodded, and said, "Huh, not bad. Got yourself a little cult following, huh?" The cafe went still. My parents froze. And for the first time in my life, I smiled without fear, because I knew exactly who I was, and I knew exactly what I was about to do next. I didn't flinch when I saw Drew. Not like before. He walked in like he owned the place, chin high, that overconfident swagger he used even when walking into rooms he had no business being in. The same smugness that used to steamroll over me when we were kids. Back then, he'd borrow my bike without asking, break it, and somehow I'd be the one apologizing. Nothing ever stuck to him. And clearly, nothing had changed. I could feel my hands curling into fists, but I kept them loose at my sides. Not here. Not now. This was my space, and I wasn't going to let him dirty it. He glanced around, gave a low whistle. Damn, you really did this, huh? He said it like he was surprised. Like it was an accident I'd built something better than he ever could. I didn't answer. My mom looked between us, clearly panicked. We didn't know he'd come, she whispered. He must have followed us. I believed her. Kind of. But the damage had already been done. Drew's presence had shifted the energy. Customers were glancing over now. Quiet murmurs rippled through the cafe. Drew stepped closer. You got a table? I'm starving. Thought maybe we could catch up, little bro. He grinned, like the past year hadn't happened. Like he hadn't hijacked everything I'd built and called it his own. Like I hadn't vanished from my own life for half a year because of him. I let the silence stretch. Then I said, loud enough for the nearest tables to hear. This cafe doesn't serve parasites. A few gasps. One soft laugh from someone near the window. My mom's face paled. My dad looked down again. Drew's grin faltered. Okay, he said, that cocky edge starting to crack. You've had your fun. Now maybe let's talk like adults. You mean the way you talked like an adult, when you forged your way onto a deed and told the staff I was just a helper? I asked, still calm. Still ice. My voice wasn't shaking anymore. Drew looked uncomfortable now. You walked out. No one kicked you out. I took a slow step forward. You took everything I built, I said, voice quiet, but with weight behind every word. The menu I created, the staff I trained, the atmosphere I cultivated, and you ran it into the ground in 6 weeks. His nostrils flared. I tried to save it. You were just playing pretend. That place wasn't sustainable. Funny, I said, folding my arms, because it's been more than sustainable here. Without you. Without them. Without anyone but the people who actually care. I turned to my parents then. My mom looked like she was on the verge of tears. My dad, stoic, unreadable. But he didn't speak. They never spoke when it counted. You shouldn't have brought him, I said to them. If this was your idea of a peace offering, it's as tone-deaf as everything else has been. I turned to go, but my dad suddenly spoke. You're right, he said. I stopped. The whole cafe seemed to pause with me. He looked at Drew, then at the customers, then back at me. You're right, he repeated. We made a mistake, and we've been living with it ever since. Drew blinked. What, Dad? You threw it away, my dad said sharply, not even looking at him. You didn't want the cafe. You wanted control. My mom put her hand over her mouth. I stood still, trying to process what I'd just heard. The apology I thought I'd never get, but now? Now it didn't feel like a victory. Because it wasn't about words anymore. It was about consequences. And that's when the ideas started to form. After they left, I sat with Tasha in the back office. She had that look in her eyes again, the one she got when she was about to do something reckless and brilliant. So what's the play? She asked. I looked at her. I'm going to take back everything they gave him. She raised an eyebrow. You want to reopen Delilah's? No, I said. I want to bury it. She nodded slowly. Tell me everything. So I did. Over the next few hours, we hatched the plan. The rise of Bruno's had already proven I could build something better, but now I wanted to expose how hollow their version of Delilah's had become. Not just to our regulars, but to the whole community. Because here's what I realized. Drew didn't just rob me of ownership. He tried to rob me of identity, of authorship, of narrative. He wanted to be the face of something I built with blood, sweat, and soul. He wanted to wear my story like a coat. So I was going to take it back, publicly, smartly, and with the kind of precision he'd never see coming. Step 1. Reclaim the regulars. It started with invitations. Handwritten. Personalized. Every former Delilah's regular I could remember got one. I still had the old customer log in a notebook, names, drinks, favorite seats. The invitation was simple. You knew me at Delilah's. Now come see what I've built. One weekend only. VIP preview of Bruno's autumn brunch menu. For our original supporters only. I sealed each one with a wax stamp. Made it feel exclusive. Intentional. That weekend, they came in droves. Clancy, Mary, the sketchbook girl. Dozens of them. Some I hadn't seen in a year. They gasped at the design. Took pictures. Hugged me. Told stories. One whispered, I knew you had something special, Liam. I'm so glad you finally got your own place. I didn't just reclaim them. I reminded them of who I was, who I'd always been. Step 2. Expose the collapse. I reached out to Nina and the other former staff who had fled Delilah's after Drew took over. We met at a tiny wine bar one evening. I bought the first round. "Tell me everything," I said. And oh boy, did they tell me. Drew had tried to cut costs by using frozen pastries. He canceled the poetry nights and community events. He replaced the chalkboard with a generic wall sign. He tried firing an employee for talking back when they asked for a second mop. He told customers that too much art makes the place look cluttered. I took notes, dates, incidents. Then I called a friend from the local food blog, the same one who had written a glowing piece on Bruno's 2 months earlier. "I've got a follow-up," I told her. "But it's more than a review. It's a story about what happens when passion is replaced with profit." She was intrigued. We scheduled a full interview. She even asked to visit both cafes to compare. Let's just say, Bruno's made an impression. Step 3. The event. Tasha helped me organize it. A weekend market pop-up in the park across from the river, right near Delilah's. Officially, it was branded as Bruno's Fall Fest, but everyone knew what it was. Live music, local vendors, pumpkin lattes, and my sourdough, center stage. We set up banners that read, "Built with heart, baked with soul, Bruno's." Customers lined up. Pictures were posted. Stories were shared. Someone even graffitied a bench near Delilah's with the phrase, "It's not the same without Liam." I didn't do it, but I didn't erase it either. Then came the final stage, the one that would sting. We announced Bruno's second location, not across town, not even down the road, directly next door to Delilah's. The space had just opened up, a former boutique store. Same foot traffic, bigger windows. I made the deposit the next day. Tasha looked at me as I signed the lease and asked, "You sure you want to go this far?" I looked her in the eye. "I'm not doing this to destroy them," I said. "I'm doing this to make sure they never rewrite my story again. And maybe make them watch what happens when the kid they overlooked becomes the man they can't ignore." The opening day of Bruno's second location was quiet on purpose. No grand ribbon cutting, no press releases, no live streams. Just a soft launch with handwritten signs in the window that said, "Bruno's, now even closer to home." It was less than 20 feet from Delilah's, literally a few steps across a narrow alley. I chose the unit not to compete with them, but to overshadow them. I didn't want to steal their customers. I wanted them to walk out of Delilah's, glance left, and feel the pull of something better, something real. The new space was beautiful, sleek but warm. Natural wood tables, soft jazz in the background, plants draped over exposed beams, glass jars of house-made granola on the shelves, a pastry counter with rotating daily specials, staff in tan aprons, hand-picked and trained the way I always wanted to, slow, intentional, empowered. We called it Bruno's West, and it was everything Delilah's used to be, before they ruined it. On day 1, we pulled in nearly double what Delilah's made that weekend. Customers who used to glance at Delilah's and sigh now lined up outside Bruno's West. The same familiar faces. New ones too. People taking selfies with our art wall. Influencers filming our lavender oat cortados and cardamom buns. A food critic even showed up unannounced and raved about our maple sage scones. The next morning, someone left a 5-star Google review. Finally, a brunch spot with heart. I remember Liam from the old place. Glad to see he's found his own space, because it turns out he was the old place. I didn't ask for that review. I didn't need to. The truth was spreading. 2 weeks in, I noticed something curious. Delilah's hours started changing. First, they reduced their brunch days from 5 to 3. Then they stopped opening on Mondays entirely. I passed by occasionally, never went in. But I saw the signs. The windows got dustier. The chalkboard, which someone had apparently returned to, now had messy handwriting and last week's date still on it. The planters out front were empty. The baristas looked tired, bored. The smell of fresh baking? Gone. It was dying. Not because I stole anything, but because there had never been a soul in Delilah's without me. They just didn't know it until it was too late. Then came the article. Remember that local food blogger I'd spoken to months ago? She published a long-form feature titled, "The Cafe That Forgot Its Heart and the One That Found It." It was brilliant. She never named names, but she didn't have to. She detailed the story of a family-run cafe that lost its spirit after a quiet, unacknowledged shift in ownership, and how its former baker left, started something new, and built a space rooted in authenticity, community, and love. She called it a parable of modern entrepreneurship and silent betrayal. It went semi-viral. Locals shared it. Foodies reposted it. Even a regional magazine reached out about profiling Bruno's. The final paragraph hit like a hammer. Sometimes the ones who build quietly are the ones you underestimate the longest. Until suddenly, they're the only ones left standing. A few days after the article dropped, I got a voicemail. It was from Drew. He didn't even say hi. Just, "Congrats, man. You won. Hope it was worth it." No apology. No ownership. Just a sulky tone from a man who thought he was invincible and found out. Too late. That legacy isn't inherited. It's earned. I didn't call him back. That same week, Tasha texted me a photo someone had sent her. It was a screenshot of Delilah's Yelp page. The top review? "Used to love this place. Not anymore. Ever since the change in management, it's been a shadow of what it was. Go to Bruno's instead. It's where the magic went." I stared at the photo for a long time. Then I opened the Bruno's Instagram account and posted our newest special. Croatian walnut rolls. My grandfather's recipe. The caption? "Some roots run too deep to be torn up." One morning, about a month later, I opened the cafe early. Just me and the soft buzz of the espresso machine. I was restocking the cups when I heard the bell over the door. I turned, expecting a delivery. It was my father. He stood there in his brown coat, hat in hand. His shoulders looked smaller than I remembered. I didn't say anything. He walked up slowly, looked around. "This place," he said, after a long pause. "It feels like home." I kept my hands busy, wiping the counter. "That's the point." He nodded. Then, quieter. "Delilah's is closing." I stopped. He didn't look at me when he said it. Just stared at the wood grain in the counter. "It can't keep up. We lost most of the regulars." Drew bailed again. "Your mother's tired. We can't run it alone." I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. Instead, I asked, "Why are you telling me?" He exhaled. "Because I wanted you to hear it from me. Not the neighborhood. And because..." He faltered. Then, "You were right. We didn't deserve you. We didn't see you. We let ourselves believe you'd never leave. That we could take without giving back. And we were wrong." I waited. Not for more words, just for the silence to settle. Then he reached into his coat pocket and placed something on the counter. A small, sealed envelope. I didn't open it. "Not yet. I hope someday you'll forgive us," he said. And with that, he left. I waited until after the morning rush to open the envelope. Inside was a letter. No legal documents. No offers. Just a page in my dad's careful handwriting. "Liam, I used to think owning something meant holding it tightly, keeping it in the family, protecting it at all costs. But now I know the truth. Ownership is not about paper. It's about presence. And you were the only one who was ever present. I'm proud of you. And I hope one day we can sit at a table together again, not as owner and son, not as employee and boss, but just as father and son. Love, Dad." I folded the letter slowly and placed it in my apron pocket. A month after Delilah's closed, the space was empty. Boarded up. Faded sign. No flowers. No chalkboard. Just silence. Someone tagged the front door with graffiti one night. A quote I didn't recognize. "You can't fake roots. They grow where the care lives." Someone sent me a photo. I didn't erase it. At Bruno's, we launched a community mentorship program for young chefs. We partnered with local schools, taught classes, gave kids a chance to shadow our bakers. Nina spearheaded the whole thing. We called it, "The Table is Yours." Sometimes people ask me what happened to the old cafe. And I tell them this. It wasn't the building. It wasn't the name. It wasn't even the menu. It was me. And when I left, the soul went with me. And when they ask if I miss it, I just smile. Because I don't need to hold a grudge. I built something better. I became something stronger. And they'll never forget it. Final line. I pass by the old Delilahs sometimes, just to remind myself how quiet it gets when the wrong people try to claim your voice. Because now they know what I always knew. You can't inherit a legacy you didn't build. I was 32 years old when I realized just how disposable I was to my own family. My name's Henry, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the responsible one. The one who organizes holidays, makes sure birthdays don't get forgotten, and tries to hold everyone together. It's almost embarrassing how much effort I put into making Christmas perfect every year. Because this year, I went all out. I hosted Christmas dinner at my house for the first time ever. I spent weeks planning the menu, cleaning, decorating, even buying everyone personalized little gifts to put on their plates. It wasn't cheap, but I didn't care. I wanted to do something special, something that would finally make me feel like part of the family again after a rough year. But Christmas came and went, and my house stayed empty. Not one call, not one text. No, sorry, we can't make it. Not even a lazy group chat emoji to acknowledge the invite. I remember standing in my kitchen that night, still wearing my nice shirt, staring at the roasted turkey that no one was going to eat. The house smelled incredible, garlic, butter, rosemary, but it was quiet. Way too quiet. I poured myself a glass of wine and tried not to cry. I didn't even know if I was angry or just hurt. Probably both. The silence continued for days. My parents posted on Facebook about how wonderful their Christmas was with the whole family, and by that, they meant my brother and his fiancée. I scrolled through their photos and saw them all smiling around a table at his house. Matching pajamas, matching mugs, matching smiles. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. A week later, I finally got a message from my dad. For one second, I thought maybe he was reaching out to apologize or at least explain. But nope. The message just said, "Your brother's wedding is $3,000 per guest. Pay up." I actually laughed out loud when I read it. I stared at my phone, waiting for the "just kidding" follow-up that never came. $3,000 to attend a wedding I hadn't even been invited to in person? My brother hadn't even called me, just sent word through our dad like I was some distant cousin they barely knew. So I did the only thing I could think of. I sent $1 with a note that said, "Enjoy." It wasn't about the money. It was about the principle. I wasn't going to bankroll the same people who couldn't even bother to show up to my table for one night out of the year. And then, as I sat there fuming, I realized just how much of my life was tied to my family's convenience. The streaming accounts, the gym membership, the Costco card, all of them in my name. And I was paying for every single one. I'd been the one covering those bills for years because it's just easier that way. That night, I sat down at my laptop and started making calls, canceling accounts one by one. It was almost therapeutic. Netflix gone. Hulu gone. Costco membership revoked. Even the family cell plan. I ported my number out and left them to deal with the rest. By the time I was done, I felt lighter. 3 days later, I found out just how much they noticed. I was making coffee one morning when I heard shouting outside. At first, I thought my neighbors were fighting. Then I recognized the voice. My mom was standing on my front lawn in her pajamas, hair sticking out in every direction, yelling my name like the whole neighborhood needed to know how furious she was. I didn't even open the door. I just stood there by the window, coffee mug in hand, watching her stomp around in the frost. And that's when I realized this was just the beginning. The morning after Mom's lawn performance, I woke up to my phone buzzing nonstop. 57 missed calls, 17 new voicemails, a family group chat that suddenly remembered I existed. Every single message was some variation of "How could you do this?" or "Do you know how much trouble you've caused?" My brother even chimed in with a gem that read, "Grow up, Henry. You're ruining things for everyone." I stared at the screen for a long time before turning it face down and walking away. I didn't owe them an explanation, but that didn't stop the guilt from creeping in like a draft through a cracked window. Part of me wanted to text back, to say, "Do you know what it felt like sitting in that empty house?" But I didn't. I was tired of explaining myself. That night, I got a knock on the door. It was Dad. He didn't even wait for me to invite him in. Just walked past me like it was still his house. He sat down at my kitchen table, glanced at the takeout box I was eating from, and made a face like I'd just committed a crime against food. "Your mother is beside herself," he started, like I'd set the house on fire. "You've embarrassed this family. You know your brother's wedding is important." I didn't say anything. I just chewed my food slowly, because I knew if I opened my mouth too soon, I'd explode. He kept going. "It's not just about you. Your nieces were trying to watch their cartoons, and suddenly the account didn't work. Do you know how humiliating that is?" They were crying. I almost laughed. They were crying over Netflix? "Don't be sarcastic, Henry." His tone snapped like a whip. "You're punishing everyone over a misunderstanding." I finally put my fork down. "A misunderstanding? Dad, you all ghosted me on Christmas. Do you know what that felt like? I sat in this house alone while you were over at Mark's drinking eggnog and singing carols. Not a single text, not a single call. And you want me to spend $3,000 so I can sit at his wedding like nothing happened?" He sighed, rubbing his temples like I was the unreasonable one. You're making too big a deal out of this. Your brother has a lot going on. We didn't think it would matter where we spent Christmas. You're an adult. You'll be fine." There it was. The line I'd heard my entire life whenever my feelings got trampled. You'll be fine. Translation: what you feel doesn't matter. Dad stayed another hour, alternating between guilt tripping me, your mother cried all night, and offering fake solutions. Maybe we can knock a little off the wedding cost if you apologize. I just sat there, nodding when appropriate, not giving him anything. When he finally left, I felt drained. I stood in the doorway watching him get into his car, and I swear he looked disappointed, not in himself, but in me, like I'd failed some unspoken family obligation. Over the next week, the pressure campaign intensified. Mom started calling my work phone when I didn't answer my cell. My aunt left me a voicemail that started with, "Sweetie, I love you," but, which is never a good sign. And then came the text from my brother. "You always do this," he wrote. "You make everything about you. It's not that hard to be supportive. We're only getting married once." I typed out several drafts before deleting them. I wanted to say, "You only get married once, but I only get one family. And you all made it clear where I rank on your priority list." But I knew it wouldn't matter. He'd just tell Mom I was being dramatic and she'd add it to her arsenal of Henry is difficult anecdotes. Then came the cherry on top. My parents actually showed up together this time, unannounced, and brought my brother with them. I was sitting on the couch, watching TV, when I heard knocking so loud it shook the doorframe. I opened it to find all three of them standing there, looking like they were about to stage an intervention. "Henry, we need to talk," Mom said, stepping inside before I could even respond. They didn't sit this time. They stood there in my living room like a firing squad. "You've embarrassed us," Mom said flatly. "Your brother's fiance's parents are asking why you're refusing to contribute. Do you know how that makes us look?" I just stared at her. "Do you know how it made me feel to be left out of Christmas?" Mom waved a hand like she was swatting away a fly. "We already told you. That wasn't personal. We were closer to Mark's place that day, and it was easier with the kids." "It wasn't easier for me," I shot back. "I spent hours cooking for nothing. You could have told me. You could have done anything except ignore me." My brother groaned like I was being ridiculous. "This is exactly what I mean, Henry. You always make things about your feelings. This is bigger than you. This is about family. You don't just pull the plug on everything because your ego got bruised." My chest tightened. Ego. That was the word they always threw at me when I dared to ask for basic respect. I didn't yell. I didn't even raise my voice. I just said, "Get out." Mom's eyes widened like I'd slapped her. "Excuse me." "You heard me," I said calmly. "Get out of my house." They stood there for a second, stunned, before Mom hissed, "You're going to regret this." When they finally left, I locked the door and sat on the couch shaking. My hands were trembling, not because I was scared, but because I was furious. That night, I got an email from the wedding planner. Someone had given her my address. It was an invoice for my share of the wedding costs, marked past due in bright red letters. I stared at it for a long time before closing the laptop and walking away. My family had officially crossed the line from passive-aggressive to just plain aggressive. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't just hurt anymore, I was done. But that was only the start of things. Because the next thing they did took everything to a whole new level. A few days after that confrontation in my living room, I thought maybe things would settle down. The call stopped. The text slowed. For a brief moment, I let myself believe that maybe they'd finally gotten the message and decided to leave me alone. But quiet in my family never means peace. Quiet means plotting. It was a Thursday evening when I got the email from my bank. The subject line made my stomach drop. Suspicious activity alert. I clicked it open and froze. There had been multiple attempts to log into my online banking account, all from devices that weren't mine. I changed my password, set up extra security, and tried to shake off the paranoia that crept in. The next morning, I found out why I had been right to be paranoid. I woke up to a flurry of notifications. My checking account was nearly empty. At first, I thought it had to be some kind of mistake. I called the bank, heart racing, and after what felt like an eternity on hold, a representative confirmed what I already feared. The withdrawals were authorized. "How?" I asked, pacing the kitchen. "Sir, it looks like someone used a check linked to your account. The signature matches the one we have on file." The rep explained gently, as though that would make me feel better. I felt dizzy. I hadn't written a check in months. Then it hit me. There was only one person who had ever had access to my old checkbook, my parents. Years ago, when I first got the account, Mom had insisted she hold on to a few checks for emergencies. I hadn't thought about it since. I asked the bank to send me copies of the cashed checks. When they arrived later that afternoon, my hands shook as I opened the envelope. There it was, in black ink. My own name on the signature line, forged in a handwriting that looked enough like mine to pass at a glance. The checks were made out to my brother. One for $1,500. Another for $2,000. The memo line on the second one said simply, "Wedding Fund." I sat at my kitchen table staring at the papers until my vision blurred. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my mom. "Your contribution has been taken care of," it read. "No need to worry about the wedding anymore." "You're welcome." I swear my hands went cold. My heart wasn't even pounding. It was like it stopped altogether. I stared at that message for a long time, my mind spinning. They hadn't just taken my money. They'd taken my choice. I called Mom immediately. She answered on the second ring, her tone light and breezy like nothing had happened. "Hi, sweetheart. Are you calling to say thank you?" "Mom," I said slowly, trying to keep my voice level. "Did you cash my checks?" There was a pause, just long enough for me to know the answer. "You weren't going to do the right thing," she said finally. "We couldn't let you embarrass us like that. It's your brother's wedding, Henry. This is what family does." "No," I said, my voice shaking now. "Family asks. Family doesn't steal." "Don't be so dramatic," she snapped. "You're acting like we robbed you. You have plenty of money, Henry. You'll make more. Your brother only gets married once." Something in me snapped. "You forged my signature. You always overreact," she said with a sigh, like she was scolding a child. "We did what we had to do." I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. My hands were shaking so badly, I nearly dropped the phone. The rest of that day was a blur. I couldn't focus on work. I couldn't eat. Every time I looked at those checks, my chest tightened. It wasn't about the money. It was about the absolute violation of trust. That evening, as if to twist the knife deeper, my brother posted on social media about the generous contribution from my amazing family and tagged me in the post. The caption read, "Wouldn't have been possible without you, bro," with a little heart emoji. I saw red. My phone rang again. This time it was Dad. "Henry, you need to stop making a fuss. The money's gone. It's done. Don't ruin this for everyone else." "Ruin this," I said, laughing bitterly. "You already ruined it. You broke into my account, forged my name, and now you're acting like I'm the problem." Dad's tone hardened. "You're not the victim here. Your brother is under a lot of stress. We had to step in. One day you'll thank us for keeping this family together." I hung up again. That night, I couldn't sleep. I just lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, thinking about every time in my life they'd dismissed me, every time they'd chosen my brother's needs over mine. The birthday they forgot because of his soccer tournament. The time I got into a car accident and they left me at the hospital to go to his college game. The years I paid for the family cell plan because you make more money, it's only fair. This wasn't a one-time betrayal. This was a pattern. And as I lay there, something shifted inside me. I felt the anger settle into something colder, sharper. A decision. The next morning, I went to the bank and started the process of filing a fraud report. The teller looked sympathetic as she explained it might take some time to investigate. I didn't care. I wasn't going to let this go quietly. When I got home, I found another message waiting for me, this time from my mom, furious now. "How dare you involve the bank?" she wrote. "Do you know what you're doing to your brother? You're going to ruin his credit before the wedding." I didn't reply, but in that moment, as I sat there in my quiet kitchen, I knew something with absolute clarity. This was war now, and I wasn't going to be the one who blinked first. The days following the fraud report were some of the longest of my life. If part 3 had been the moment where something inside me snapped, part 4 was the quiet, aching aftermath, the part where you sit in the wreckage and realize just how alone you are. The calls didn't stop, but the tone shifted. Where before there had been guilt tripping and pleading, now there was anger. My voicemail was full of relatives telling me I'd gone too far. My aunt left a long message saying I'd publicly humiliated the family by dragging the bank into this. My cousin, who I hadn't spoken to in months, texted me to say, "Bro, you're making this worse than it has to be. Just drop it and move on." Even my grandmother, who had always been the one person in my corner, called me one evening and sighed into the phone. "Henry, sweetheart, she said gently. I know you're upset, but this is going to tear the family apart. Is it really worth it? I didn't know how to answer her. Was it worth it? I didn't feel like I was the one tearing the family apart. They had done that the moment they chose to betray me, but I also knew she couldn't see it that way. To her, I was the one making noise, the one forcing everyone to pick a side. I found myself withdrawing. I stopped answering the phone. I stayed late at work just so I wouldn't have to come home to an empty house that smelled faintly of rosemary and lemon from that wasted Christmas dinner. The sight of my dining table still made my stomach twist. The half-burnt candle in the middle of it mocked me every time I passed by. One night, I came home to find an envelope taped to my front door. It was from my parents. Inside was a letter, handwritten, in my mom's looping script, that managed to be both apologetic and condescending at the same time. Henry, it began, we love you, but this behavior is hurting everyone. You need to grow up and stop making such a spectacle. Your brother is under tremendous stress right now, and you are adding to it. Think of the children. They don't understand why they can't watch their shows or why everyone is upset with Uncle Henry. Please, for the sake of the family, drop this. We can talk about Christmas later. Love, Mom. I read the letter 3 times, each time feeling my jaw tighten a little more. The way she wrote, we can talk about Christmas later, as if it were some minor scheduling conflict and not the very thing that had started this entire chain reaction, nearly made me rip the letter in half. Instead, I folded it carefully and put it back in the envelope. I wasn't sure why I kept it. Maybe because I knew I'd need the reminder later. The worst part was how quiet the house had gotten. Before all this, I used to love my little routines, cooking dinner, watching a show, texting a friend. Now everything felt heavy. Even music sounded wrong. I'd put on a playlist and then turn it off halfway through because it felt like noise. At work, my coworkers started asking if I was okay. I brushed them off, saying I was just tired, but the truth was I wasn't sleeping. I'd lie awake at night staring at the ceiling, replaying every word my parents had said in my living room, every time they'd made me feel small over the years. It wasn't just this incident. It was years of being the dependable one, the one who could handle it, the one who always gave more than he got back. And somewhere in those sleepless nights, the anger started to harden into something else, something colder. One Friday, I took a half day from work and went to the bank in person. I sat with a manager and went over every account I had, making sure there were no other checks floating out there, no hidden links my family could exploit. I moved my savings into a new account they didn't know existed and set up extra verification on everything I could. The manager, a kind older man with glasses, looked at me over the desk and said quietly, I've seen this before. Family disputes can get ugly. You're doing the right thing protecting yourself. That was the first time someone outside the situation had validated what I was feeling, and it hit me harder than I expected. I left the bank feeling like I could breathe for the first time in days. Over the weekend, I started making a list. At first, it was just practical things, what accounts were still in my name, what bills I was paying that benefited my family. But as I kept writing, the list turned into something more. I wrote down every slight, every moment where I'd been overlooked, every time my parents had chosen my brother's needs over mine. By Sunday night, I had pages of notes. Looking at them all together was like staring at a map of my entire life. A map that showed exactly how many times I'd been pushed to the side, expected to sacrifice, told I was fine when I wasn't. I didn't know what I was going to do with that list yet, but just writing it made me feel less powerless. Monday morning, I woke up before my alarm and sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. For the first time in weeks, I felt calm. Not happy, not exactly, but steady. That was the day I stopped hoping for an apology. And that was the day I quietly started to plan. It wasn't revenge yet, not exactly. At first, it was just practical, protective measures. I met with HR at work to update my emergency contacts. I changed the locks on my house. I updated my will, something I'd been putting off for years. But underneath those practical steps, something sharper was forming. Because as much as I was protecting myself, a part of me was starting to imagine what it would feel like to turn the tables. To stop being the person they could depend on. To make them feel what it was like to be left out, left behind, left in the dark. I wasn't ready to act on it yet. But the thought was there now, and it wasn't going away. Then, just when I thought things couldn't get any lower, I got an invitation in the mail, a formal, embossed wedding invitation with my name on it. Under guest contribution, It listed the $3,000 they had taken from me, marked as paid. And just below that, in neat cursive, my brother had written a personal note. Glad you came through for the family. See you there. I put the invitation down on the counter and walked out of the room. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just sat in silence, letting the anger settle deeper until it felt like stone. Because now I knew exactly what needed to be done. In the weeks after that wedding invitation, something in me shifted. I stopped reacting to every message, every phone call, every guilt trip. It wasn't that I forgave them, far from it, but I decided I wouldn't let their chaos control my day anymore. For the first time in my life, I started living like they didn't exist. It was almost unnerving how quickly things started to feel lighter once I made that decision. I threw myself into work, taking on projects I'd been too distracted to commit to before. My boss noticed. 2 weeks later, I was called into his office and offered a promotion, a real one, not just a title change. It came with a raise big enough that the money they had stolen from me now looked like a rounding error. I went home that night, poured myself a drink, and sat at the kitchen table staring at the offer letter. I thought about how my dad had called me selfish for not funding the wedding, how my mom had said I was making a spectacle. And then I thought about this. Me, sitting in my own house, with my own career, earning my own success that no one could take away. It was the first time in a long time that I felt proud of myself. With the raise came new possibilities. I paid off the last of my student loans and then started putting money into a separate account, a private one that no one in my family knew about. Every paycheck, a chunk went in there. Not for them, not for emergencies, not for some hypothetical future Christmas dinner. Just for me. I started taking better care of myself, too. It was almost embarrassing how quickly I realized I'd been neglecting my own needs. I signed up for a gym membership, one with a rock climbing wall, which I'd always wanted to try but never had the time for. I found a trainer who didn't make me feel judged for being out of shape. After a few weeks, I started sleeping better. Friends I hadn't seen in months started inviting me out again, and this time, I said yes. I went to trivia nights, weekend hikes, even a pottery class that a coworker convinced me to try. For the first time in years, my calendar was filled with things I actually looked forward to. I didn't post any of this online. I didn't brag about it to anyone. But quietly, my life was getting bigger, and theirs was shrinking, at least where I was concerned. One day at work, we had a team lunch to celebrate closing a big deal. I was laughing with my coworkers when I saw my mom's name flash across my phone screen. Normally, that would have ruined my entire mood, but this time, I just let it ring. When the voicemail came through, I didn't even listen to it right away. Later, I played it back while cooking dinner. Mom's voice was tight, almost desperate. "Henry, this has gone on long enough. You can't just ignore us forever. Your brother's fiance's parents are asking questions. People are starting to wonder what's wrong with you." I smiled to myself, stirring the pan. For once, the shame she was trying to dump on me didn't stick. By spring, the fraud investigation had made progress. The bank sent me a letter saying they had confirmed the checks were indeed unauthorized. There would be a formal report filed, and while it would take time to recover the funds, the process was moving in my favor. That letter felt like more than just a financial win. It felt like someone, somewhere, had finally said, "Yes, Henry, what happened to you was wrong." It gave me the push I didn't know I needed. I hired a financial advisor. Together, we went through every account, every asset, every piece of paperwork tied to my name. Anything my parents had access to, even passively, I moved or closed. I opened a P.O. box so they couldn't just drop letters at my door anymore. When I was done, I realized something. For the first time in my adult life, there was nothing they could use to reach me unless I wanted to be reached. That was power. And it wasn't just financial power. I noticed it in the way I carried myself at work, too. I spoke up more in meetings, started mentoring junior employees, even volunteered to lead a new initiative that no one else wanted to touch. By summer, I was the one people went to for answers. My boss asked me to represent the company at a conference out of state, all expenses paid. The day I flew out, I got a text from my brother saying, "Hope you're ready for the wedding speech." I stared at it for a long time before turning off my phone and boarding the plane. The conference was one of the best weeks of my life. I met people from all over the industry, made connections, and came home with opportunities that were bigger than anything I'd imagined for myself a year ago. Meanwhile, I heard through a cousin that my family was getting more and more frustrated. Apparently, They've been telling everyone that Henry is being difficult and Henry is acting out. But the less I engaged, the less power those words seemed to have. People started to notice that my version of events made more sense. A few even reached out privately to say they supported me, though they couldn't get involved. It didn't matter. I wasn't looking for allies anymore. I wasn't looking for apologies. I was building something much more valuable: independence. One night, sitting on my back porch with a glass of whiskey, I thought about that Christmas turkey, cold and untouched in my kitchen months ago. I thought about the forged checks, the letter taped to my door, the look on my mother's face when I told them to leave my house. And for the first time, the thought of revenge didn't just feel satisfying, it felt inevitable. I didn't know exactly what shape it would take yet, but I knew this much: I wasn't going to just walk back into their lives like nothing had happened. When I made my move, it was going to be deliberate, calm, and impossible to ignore. And as the wedding date drew closer, I could feel the plan forming, piece by piece. By the time summer was fading into fall, I had reached a point where I wasn't just surviving without my family, I was thriving. The wedding was now only a few months away, but for once, I wasn't dreading the date. If anything, I felt a strange anticipation. I knew I wasn't going to just show up, smile for the pictures, and pretend everything was fine. But if I was going to make a statement, I needed information. And that's when I got it, accidentally. One Thursday, I ran into my cousin Laura at the grocery store. She looked surprised to see me, which made sense. Most of my family had been acting like I'd gone into hiding. After some small talk, she leaned in and whispered, "I probably shouldn't tell you this, but your brother's wedding is a financial mess." That caught my attention immediately. Apparently, the $3,000 per guest fee wasn't just about covering the fancy venue. My brother and his fiancée had booked an over-the-top destination wedding at a vineyard and had overextended themselves so badly that they were barely making the payment schedule. They were counting on every guest contributing, not just me, but everyone, to make the numbers work. If people back out, they could lose the deposit, Laura said. They already had to cut the open bar for the rehearsal dinner because they're over budget. I thanked her and left with my groceries, but my mind was racing. This wasn't just about them wanting me to do the right thing. They needed me. Without my contribution, they'd be underwater. And now that I had filed the fraud report, they were stuck using money they'd taken illegally. For the first time since this whole nightmare started, I had leverage. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a notebook and started writing. This wasn't like the list I made back when I was angry and hurting. This was surgical. I wrote down everything I knew: the timeline of the wedding payments, what my cousin had told me about the budget, every voicemail and text where my parents or brother had pressured me to pay. I had a paper trail now, enough to show anyone who asked that I wasn't just being difficult, I was responding to outright theft. Then I started thinking about my appearance at the wedding. If I went at all, I wasn't going to just quietly sit in the corner. If I declined, I wasn't going to just say I was busy. Whatever I chose, it was going to make a point. Over the next few weeks, opportunities kept falling into my lap. The fraud investigation wrapped up, officially in my favor. The bank reimbursed me for the stolen money and flagged my parents' access for fraud. They would now have a very hard time opening any joint accounts or using my information for anything. Around the same time, work gave me a significant end-of-year bonus for the project I'd led over the summer. Between the promotion, the bonus, and the money reimbursed by the bank, I was now in the best financial position I'd ever been. I even upgraded my car, not to flaunt, but to remind myself that I had built this life for me, with no one's help. But perhaps the biggest turning point came when I met with a lawyer. At first, I just wanted to make sure there was nothing more my parents could access financially. But the conversation quickly turned strategic. "This is more than just a family spat," my lawyer said, flipping through the documents I'd brought. "They forged checks, they coerced you, and now they're harassing you. If they try anything else, we can take action, legally and financially." Hearing a professional confirm what I already knew, that this wasn't just drama, this was wrongdoing, felt like flipping a switch. I left that office with a plan forming so clearly in my head I could almost see it. Meanwhile, the wedding group chat, yes, they had one. Yes, they added me to it without asking, was full of updates. They were still talking about finalizing contributions and making sure everyone was on the same page. Each message was a reminder of just how transactional this whole thing had become. One day, the wedding planner accidentally replied all to an email thread I was CC'd on, attaching the full spreadsheet of guests, payment statuses, and notes. I don't think she meant for me to see it, but I read every line. There it was in black and white. My name, with a note next to it that said paid via Henry's parents. Under the comments column, it said, needs attitude adjusted before wedding day. I sat back in my chair and stared at the screen. That was it. That was the moment I stopped just planning and started preparing. Because this wasn't just about money anymore. This was about respect, or rather, the complete lack of it. They saw me as a problem to be managed, a box to be checked, a wallet with legs. And now, thanks to their own carelessness, I had everything I needed to flip the script. I printed the email and put it with the rest of my documents. Then I called the lawyer back. I think I know exactly what I want to do, I told her. The next few weeks were strangely calm. Outwardly, I went about my life, work, gym, dinners with friends. But behind the scenes, I was moving pieces into place. Securing my finances, drafting a letter, making sure that when I finally made my move, it would land like a thunderclap. Every time I passed my fridge and saw that wedding invitation still stuck to it with a magnet, I smiled just a little. Not out of joy, but out of certainty. I wasn't just going to protect myself anymore. I was going to make sure they never forgot the day they decided to cross me. The wedding date was circled on my calendar, not as an event to look forward to, but as a deadline. Everything I did in the weeks leading up to it was deliberate. Every step felt like sharpening a blade. Slow, methodical, precise. I started by finalizing my finances. My lawyer helped me draft a formal letter to my parents and brother stating, in clear legal language, that the money they had taken had been flagged as fraud, reimbursed by the bank, and that any further attempts to access my accounts or represent my contribution as voluntary would be considered financial harassment. It was professional, calm, and just intimidating enough to get their attention. I sent it by certified mail. 3 days later, I got the read receipt, and then silence. Not even a phone call. That silence was almost sweeter than an apology. But I wasn't done. Next, I prepared a folder, a neat, organized packet with copies of the forged checks, the bank's reimbursement letter, the email thread from the wedding planner, and a brief summary of events from Christmas onward. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional. It was just facts. Clean and undeniable. And then I waited. The wedding week arrived. People from my extended family were flying into town, and I knew from social media that my parents were running themselves ragged getting everything ready. My brother posted daily updates about the most important weekend of our lives. The night before the wedding, I got a final text from my mom. Henry, we expect you to behave tomorrow. This is Mark's day. Please don't cause a scene. I smiled at that, because she had no idea that the scene had already been set, and not by me. I had RSVP'd yes months ago, but I hadn't told anyone how I planned to attend. On the morning of the wedding, I put on the sharpest suit I owned. Not a rented tux, not something bland. A tailored charcoal suit, perfectly pressed. The kind of outfit that says, I am not here by accident. When I arrived at the Vineyard venue, I was greeted by the wedding planner, who looked startled to see me. I handed her an envelope, my packet of documents, and said calmly, make sure this gets to the bride's parents before the ceremony starts. She hesitated, then took it. Inside that packet was everything. Proof that their generous contributions narrative was built on stolen money, a polite but firm statement that I would not be funding any further expenses, and a request that my name be removed from any mention of contributors in their speeches or materials. By the time I took my seat, I could feel the ripple effect starting. The bride's parents were sitting 2 rows up, whispering furiously, passing the folder back and forth. My brother glanced back at me once, frowning, as if he could feel that something had shifted but couldn't place what. I sat there calmly, hands folded, smiling slightly. The ceremony went on as planned, for a while. But after the vows, when the officiant invited the parents to give a few words, there was a pause. A long, uncomfortable pause. My mother stood, walked up to the microphone, and then just said, congratulations, before sitting back down, tight-lipped and pale. It was subtle, but I could see it. The tension, the whispered conversations, the sideways looks. By the time we moved to the reception, the gossip had already started. I didn't confront anyone directly. I didn't raise my voice. I simply made sure that the truth was undeniable. and let it do the work for me. Over dinner, I caught bits of conversation from nearby tables. Did you hear about the checks? Apparently, Henry didn't actually agree to pay. Wait, they forged? No wonder he's mad. By the time the first dance was over, the atmosphere had shifted entirely. The fairy tale image my parents had worked so hard to maintain had cracks running through it, and everyone could see them. When my brother finally cornered me near the bar, his face was red. "What did you do?" he hissed. I took a sip of my drink, met his eyes, and said calmly, "I told the truth." "You couldn't just let it go?" he said, his voice rising. "I did let it go," I replied evenly. "I let go of paying for things I didn't agree to. I let go of being the family doormat. You should be thanking me. You got your wedding. You got your money. All I did was make sure people knew how you got it." His jaw worked like he wanted to yell, but with guests watching, he just glared and stalked off. I stayed just long enough to finish my drink, then slipped out quietly before the cake cutting. The next morning, my phone lit up with messages from cousins and old family friends. Most were short, "Good for you," or "I had no idea." But a few were longer, saying things like, "We always wondered why you were treated differently." For the first time in months, I felt like I had exhaled completely. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it was clean. And it was only the beginning. Because the wedding may have been over, but the fallout was just starting, and I had one final move left to make. The morning after the wedding, I woke up late, made myself coffee, and sat out on my porch while my phone buzzed like a wasp nest. My family's group chat was a full-on firestorm. Messages flying back and forth, people demanding explanations, others defending me, some saying they'd had no idea what had been going on. I scrolled for a while, half amused, half detached. For once, I wasn't anxious about what I might find in those messages. I knew exactly where I stood. Around noon, my parents showed up at my house. I saw them through the window as they walked up the driveway. Mom looking tight-lipped and pale, Dad with his jaw set like he was about to deliver a lecture. I opened the door, but didn't invite them in. "Henry, we need to talk," Dad said, his voice low but tense. "Then talk," I said, leaning against the doorframe. Mom stepped forward. "You humiliated us yesterday. Do you have any idea what you've done?" The bride's parents were furious. People were whispering all night. "You ruined Mark's wedding." I shook my head slowly. "No, I didn't ruin anything. You ruined it the moment you decided to take money from me without asking. All I did was tell the truth." Dad's face went red. "You could have handled this privately." "I tried to," I said evenly. "You ignored me. You dismissed me. You treated me like I was just a wallet with legs. So I handled it myself." Mom's eyes narrowed. "You've embarrassed this family. People are saying things." "Good," I said, cutting her off. "Let them talk. Maybe they'll think twice before they do to someone else what you did to me." For a long moment, we just stood there, staring at each other. Then Mom's voice softened, almost pleading. "Henry, we're family. Can't we just move on from this?" I laughed softly, not out of humor, but disbelief. "Move on? You forged my name, emptied my account, and then tried to make me feel guilty for being upset. You didn't just cross a line, Mom. You burned the bridge. I can't just move on from that." Dad exhaled, shaking his head. "So what now? You're just going to cut us off? Pretend we don't exist?" I didn't answer right away. I took a deep breath, steadying myself, then said, "I'm done letting you treat me like an afterthought. I'm done paying for the privilege of being ignored. From now on, I'm living my life without you. If you want to be in it, you can start by apologizing sincerely. Not sorry you feel that way. Sorry for what you did." Mom opened her mouth, then closed it. Neither of them said a word. "Until then," I added quietly, "don't come to my house uninvited again." I closed the door gently, not slamming it, not yelling, just shutting it with finality. For the rest of that day, I felt a strange calm. It wasn't happiness exactly, but it was clarity. I went for a long drive that afternoon, windows down, music playing, and realized that for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for their approval. In the weeks that followed, the fallout spread. Word got around about what had really happened with the checks. Some relatives were shocked, others weren't surprised at all. A few even reached out to me privately to say, "Good for you for standing up for yourself." Meanwhile, my brother's wedding bills kept piling up. Without my parents being able to lean on me financially, they had to cut back on their post-wedding honeymoon plans and sell a few big-ticket items they'd bought on credit. My cousin Laura later told me that the bride's parents were furious about being kept in the dark and had demanded that my parents cover some of the overages themselves. My parents tried calling a few more times, but I let it go to voicemail. Eventually, the call stopped. One Saturday, I took down the wedding invitation from my fridge, slipped it into the folder with the rest of my documents, and put it away in my filing cabinet. Not as a keepsake, but as a reminder of what I'd survived. That evening, I invited a few friends over for dinner. We sat around my table, eating, laughing, talking late into the night. For the first time since that lonely Christmas, the house felt full again. Full in a way that had nothing to do with blood relatives and everything to do with people who actually cared about me. As I cleared the table and turned off the lights, I caught my reflection in the window. I looked different, lighter. I realized then that I hadn't just taken revenge, I had taken back my life. And it felt better than I'd ever imagined. My name's Leo, I'm 32, and for most of my adult life, I've been the unofficial ATM of my family. It wasn't always like that. When I was younger, we were a pretty close unit, or at least I thought we were. After my dad passed away when I was 20, I kind of stepped into the role he left behind without even realizing it. My mom, my younger sister Mia, and my uncle Ray, her brother, started leaning on me for everything. At first, it was small, helping with groceries, chipping in for repairs, driving Mia to appointments when her car broke down. It felt natural. Family helps family, right? But as I got older and started building a modest life for myself, I realized they never stopped needing me. Or rather, expecting from me. Rent came up late. I covered it. Mia wanted to go on a weekend trip, but didn't have enough money. I transferred her some fun cash. Uncle Ray had his hours cut. I picked up the tab for his utility bills. My mom, she never asked directly anymore. She just said things like, the landlord's being a pain again, or the fridge is making that noise. Hope it lasts the month. And I'd send money. Every time. I didn't even think about it. Not really. Because it wasn't about the money, it was about being needed. It made me feel useful. Like I was doing something right. Even if my own social life was non-existent and my apartment was the size of a shoebox. Then came that call. It was a Saturday afternoon, one of those cloudy, lazy days when I was cleaning my kitchen while a podcast played in the background. My phone buzzed on the counter. Mom calling. I picked it up, figuring it was another subtle hint about rent. But when I answered, there was no response. Just silence, then some rustling, and then voices. I pulled the phone back, double-checked the screen. Still on the call. I almost hung up, figured it was an accidental dial, but then I heard my name. Oh please, Leo will pay it. He always does, my mom's voice said, laughing lightly. He's too desperate to say no. I froze. Mia chimed in next, her voice sharper, almost gleeful. I told my friend we basically have a walking wallet. He acts all proud of helping, but he'd fall apart if we stopped asking. He needs us to need him. My stomach twisted, but I couldn't move. I just stood there, clutching the phone as their laughter spilled through the speaker. I heard ice clink in a glass. Uncle Ray spoke next, his voice always a little too loud, like he thought everything he said was brilliant. It's sad, really, he chuckled. 30-something, no wife, no kids, no real life. All he's got is us. Poor guy thinks money equals love. I didn't even breathe. My hand shook as I lowered the phone to the counter. I don't remember how long I stood there, listening to them roast me like I was some pathetic sitcom character. Eventually, the call dropped on its own. I sat down at the table, still gripping the edge of my phone. My first instinct was disbelief. Maybe I heard it wrong. Maybe it was out of context. But no. I replayed it in my head, over and over, and there was no denying it. They weren't just mocking me. They knew what they were doing. They knew I was bending over backward to keep them afloat, and instead of being grateful, they were laughing behind my back. The worst part? They were right. I had built my life around being needed by them. Somewhere along the way, I'd convinced myself that being indispensable was the same as being loved. That if I stopped giving, I'd stop matching. I didn't call them out right away. I didn't send a furious text or demand an apology. I just sat with it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing Mia's voice in my head. He needs us to need him. The truth of it stung more than any insult. The next few days were a blur. I went to work, smiled at my coworkers, made small talk, but my brain wouldn't shut up. I kept trying to justify things. They didn't mean it. They were just joking. They're family. But every excuse fell flat under the weight of that call. Then, as if nothing happened, on the third day, I got a text from my mom. Hey sweetheart, rent's due Friday. Can you send the usual? Landlords being annoying again. Love you. No greeting. No warmth. Just the same cycle, as if the last few days hadn't happened. I stared at that message for a long time. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I could have just sent the money, like always. Pretended I never heard anything. Part of me wanted to. The familiar part. The one that thought love meant giving. But something inside me had cracked. Not snapped in anger. Cracked open like a door finally easing off rusted hinges. A realization had crept in through that space. They didn't love me more because I helped. They loved the help. They loved the money. They loved the convenience of me. Not me. And suddenly, for the first time in years, I didn't feel desperate to say yes. I typed back one word, no. Then I put my phone down and waited. The response didn't take long. Excuse me? Came the reply. I didn't answer. I left it on read. 10 minutes later, another ping. Leo, what's going on? You know we're counting on you. Don't be childish. I still said nothing. That evening, my sister messaged me too. Why are you being weird? If you're mad, just say it. Don't play games. It was almost funny. After years of unquestioned giving, the first no was met with confusion, like I'd broken some silent contract. Like I was the unreasonable one. I went quiet for the rest of the night. No texts. No calls. I let them sit with it. But that wasn't the end. Not even close. Because a few days later, they showed up at my door. It was early evening when I heard the knock. Not the usual gentle tap of a neighbor, but the impatient, hollow thudding of someone who felt entitled to be let in. I glanced through the peephole, and there they were. My mom, Mia, and Uncle Ray. All standing shoulder to shoulder like some disheveled committee. I didn't open the door right away. I just watched them. My mom wore that tight-lipped smile she always used when she was trying to look sweet but felt annoyed. Mia stood with her arms crossed, chewing gum, already rolling her eyes. Ray looked like he'd just rolled out of bed and brought his ego along for the ride. I debated pretending I wasn't home, but something inside me, some exhausted, worn-out part of me, stood up and walked to the lock. I cracked the door open just an inch. Leo, my mom said, her voice sugary. There you are? We were in the neighborhood. You live 40 minutes away, I said, keeping my voice flat. She blinked. Well, we were getting groceries. Thought we'd stop by. Can we come in? I didn't budge. Why? Now Mia stepped forward. Seriously? You're gonna act like this? Because of what? A stupid joke. So you do know I heard it? I said, still not opening the door. Uncle Ray scoffed behind them. Oh, come on, Leo. Don't be dramatic. Families joke around. You think we haven't said worse about each other? That's supposed to make me feel better? Mom sighed, suddenly shifting from sweet to stern. Leo, you're taking this the wrong way. We appreciate everything you've done. We were just joking. That call wasn't meant for you. But it was about me, I said quietly. You laughed about how I always pay your rent. You called me a burden. Said I was desperate. Mia rolled her eyes again. You're twisting everything. It was just a dumb conversation. You seriously gonna throw away your whole family over that? My hand tightened on the edge of the door. You already did that for me. That's when my mom's mask cracked. Her voice dropped, cold and clipped. Fine. You want to play hardball? You think you're some martyr now? After all we've done for you growing up? I felt my chest burn. I never asked you to pay me back. I just wanted to matter to you. And now I know what you think of me when you think I'm not listening. There was silence for a beat. Then Ray chuckled. Man, you really are sensitive. All this over some rent money. That did it. I opened the door all the way and stepped aside, not to let them in, but to show them the packed boxes behind me. My living room looked like it had been hit by a moving crew. Stacked cardboard boxes labeled books, kitchen, bedroom. A disassembled desk leaned against the wall. My lease wasn't up for 3 more months, but I'd already put in notice. Where are you going? My mom asked, trying to mask the panic. I met her eyes. Somewhere new. Somewhere far. Where no one mocks me when I'm not in the room. Where I don't spend my days trying to earn love that should have been unconditional. You're running away? Mia scoffed. Real mature. No, I said. I'm removing myself. I could see the shift in their faces now. My mom's faux innocence hardened into disbelief. Mia's smugness curled into something colder. Ray just stared, as if I'd started speaking a language he couldn't understand. But we need you, Mom said suddenly, almost pleading. You can't just leave. Rent's due. And there it was. Not we miss you. Not we're sorry. Not we'll change. Just, we need your money. That was the moment it really sunk in. I wasn't their son. I was their paycheck with a guilty conscience. I stepped back into the doorway. "You'll figure it out," I said. "You always told me I was just a burden. Maybe life without me will feel lighter." Mia opened her mouth to say something, but I closed the door before she could. This time I locked it, not out of anger, but out of finality. I sat on the floor beside the boxes, listening as the footsteps faded down the hall. My hands trembled, not from fear or regret, but from the weight of finally choosing me. For the next few days, silence followed. No texts, no calls. I kept expecting some explosion, an apology, maybe, or one of their passive-aggressive guilt trips. But instead, nothing. Then, a week later, I got a letter in the mail. It wasn't handwritten. No envelope. Just a folded paper with 4 words scrawled in the center. "You'll regret this, Leo." There was no signature. But I didn't need one. I knew who sent it. I held that paper in my hand for a long time. It was printed from a computer, not written by hand, which somehow made it colder. No warmth. No attempt at conversation. Just a threat veiled as a statement. "You'll regret this, Leo. No love, Mom." No from your sister. Not even a signature from Uncle Ray, who used to sign text messages with a thumbs-up emoji like it was his trademark. Just those 4 words, like a warning carved into stone. I didn't show anyone. I didn't tell my coworkers or my friends. Not yet, because I wasn't sure what it meant. Part of me wanted to brush it off as a last-ditch effort to guilt me into resuming my old role. Another part, the quieter, more cautious voice I usually ignored, told me to take it seriously. These weren't strangers. These were people who knew where I lived, what hours I worked, the places I frequented. People I'd trusted with every version of myself for years. So I did what I never used to do. I created distance. Physical and digital. I changed the locks. Not because I thought they'd break in, but because I didn't want to sleep with the thought they could. I updated every password, canceled the shared streaming accounts they'd been using for free, and removed myself from the shared family calendar. Yes, that existed. I blocked their numbers, then unblocked them, then blocked them again. I was caught between a storm of second-guessing and a desperate need to finally breathe. But here's the strange part. Once the silence settled in, once the messages stopped and the space between us grew wider, I started hearing the echoes of who I used to be. Like one night, I made pasta. Not because someone asked. Not because I needed to deliver food to my mom or Mia forgot to shop again. Just for me. I lit a candle, ate slowly, took a photo, looked at it, deleted it. I didn't need to prove to anyone that I was okay. I just needed to be okay. But the letter never left my desk. It sat there, folded, quiet, a white flag pretending to be a bomb. And eventually, curiosity got the better of me. I decided to find out where it came from. I flipped it over, looked for postage, but there was none. No stamp, no mailing address, which meant it hadn't been mailed. It had been dropped off. That made my heart skip. I checked my building's cameras, something I'd never done before. I asked the landlord to let me take a peek, using the excuse that a weird letter showed up, which wasn't technically a lie. He agreed, barely looking up from his phone. The footage showed exactly what I feared. 3 days earlier, right before sunset, a figure in a gray hoodie walked up to the door. Face tilted down, hoodie pulled tight. They didn't buzz in. Didn't need to. Someone else walked out, and they slipped in behind them. Classic move. The person approached my floor, stood outside my unit for less than 10 seconds, slipped something under the door, and left without knocking. The timestamp? 6:42 p.m. That same evening, I'd been in the shower with my music on loud. I never even heard a footstep. I played the video back 3 times. The gait was familiar. Too familiar. Mia. The way she walked, the slight sway in her step. The way she adjusted her ponytail before she turned the corner. She always did that when she was nervous. So it wasn't a threat from a stranger. It was a message from my sister. And somehow, that made it worse. She didn't call, didn't text, didn't say, "I'm sorry." She just dropped off a typed sheet of paper like a coward, wrapped in venom and pride, and slinked away before I could open the door. What kind of family operates like that? Mine, I guess. The next morning, I left the letter on the cafe table next to my coffee, staring at it like it might grow teeth and bite. I almost tossed it in the trash. Almost lit it on fire just to feel dramatic. Instead, I pulled out my phone and started typing. To Mia. Subject. About that letter. I stared at the blank message for nearly 20 minutes. My fingers hovered, then stopped. My chest tightened. I wanted to say something, anything, to shake her, to break through whatever wall she'd built around herself that let her mock me so easily. But every draft I started felt like a return to who I used to be. So I deleted the email. I put my phone down. I grabbed my coffee and walked out, leaving the letter behind on the table like a ghost I was done carrying. But that didn't mean I was safe. Because the next week, my paycheck hit my account, except it was short. By a lot. Confused, I logged into my bank account. Looked at the transaction history. Everything looked normal until I spotted a transfer I didn't recognize. $1,250 sent to an account ending in numbers I didn't recognize. Except I did recognize it. It was Mia's account, the one I used to send her money to. The same account I deleted from my favorites weeks ago. The transaction had been scheduled automatically, from a setting I forgot even existed. Scheduled monthly. Quiet. Hidden in a section I hadn't thought to check. Set to repeat every 15th. The last one I hadn't canceled. I stared at the screen, my hands ice cold. It wasn't over. Not even close. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying everything. The call I wasn't meant to hear, the letter shoved under my door, and now this. A chunk of my hard-earned money silently funneled out of my account by someone who used to call me her favorite person when she wanted a new phone. It wasn't even the money that stung the most. It was the intent behind it, the quiet, calculated assumption that I was still too weak to notice. Or worse, too spineless to stop it. At 2:34 a.m., I sat in the glow of my laptop, digging through every bank setting I could find. The automatic transfer had been scheduled months ago, during a stretch when I was working overtime and juggling 2 side gigs just to stay afloat. It had somehow gotten buried under all the chaos. I canceled it immediately. I stared at the confirmation screen for a long while, then clicked through my statements to see how many payments had already gone out under my nose. 7 monthly payments of $1,250, all going straight to Mia's account. No questions asked, no thank you. Not even a joke about paying me back. $8,750. Just gone. I felt stupid. I hated how stupid I felt. Like I'd been sleepwalking through my own life, while my family used my wallet like a shared resource. I used to laugh at stories like mine. Stories where the protagonist lets everyone walk over them while believing it's love. I used to say, that could never be me. And yet here I was. By morning, I knew what I had to do. But I also knew I couldn't go in swinging. I tried the quiet exit. I tried no contact. I'd even tried passive resistance. None of it made a dent. These people didn't respond to distance. They responded to leverage. So I got some. First, I pulled every receipt, every bank statement, every text message requesting money, every transaction tied to Mia, my mom, or Uncle Ray. I highlighted the dates, labeled the requests, and tallied up the totals. Then I went through every group text, every backhanded thank you I'd ever received that admitted who the money came from and why. By the end of the week, I had a 12-page document, cold, factual, detailed. Then I went a step further. I called a lawyer. Not to sue, not to press charges, but to make sure what I was about to do wouldn't come back to bite me. The lawyer was a kind, quiet man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a calming presence. He read through everything while I sat in his office, trying not to fidget. When he finally looked up, he said, legally, you're in the clear. You gave the money voluntarily, but since that last transfer was automatic and unauthorized by you at the time, you have grounds to demand it back. You likely won't get the full amount unless you take legal action. But I don't think that's why you came here. He was right. I didn't want a courtroom. I didn't want headlines. I wanted a reckoning. Something they couldn't laugh off. Something they'd remember. And I knew exactly how to deliver it. My mom's birthday was coming up. She always hosted a family dinner. Small, casual, but sacred. Anyone who didn't show up was immediately labeled ungrateful or too busy for family. I hadn't RSVP'd. I knew they expected me to cave at the last minute like I always did. This year, I showed up early. I brought a black tote bag and a calm smile. My mom greeted me at the door like nothing had happened. Her hug was awkward, stiff, performative. I'm glad you came, she said. I was worried you were still sulking. I didn't respond. I just smiled and walked inside. Mia was in the kitchen, pouring wine. She glanced at me and smirked. Look who decided to grow up. I said nothing. Uncle Ray gave me a mock salute from the couch. Our golden goose returns. I smiled at him too. Dinner started the same as always. pot roast, mashed potatoes, cheap wine, and even cheaper conversation. They laughed. They gossiped. They nudged me with jokes and half-hearted compliments, trying to pretend things were normal again. Halfway through dessert, I reached into my tote bag. "I brought something," I said. They turned. I pulled out 3 envelopes and slid them across the table, one to each of them. My mom squinted at hers. "What's this?" "Read it," I said. She opened the envelope and pulled out the first 2 pages. Her smile faded almost immediately. Mia stopped chewing. Ray's expression turned from confused to defensive in seconds. "These are," my mom started. "Records," I said, calm as ever. "Itemized. Every dollar I've given you over the last 5 years. With timestamps, request texts, and bank confirmations." "Why would you do this?" Mia snapped. "Because you said I was desperate to be needed," I said. "So I wanted to see how much that desperation cost me." Uncle Ray slammed his envelope shut. "This is out of line, Leo." "No," I said. "What's out of line is stealing from someone who loved you enough to believe you every single time you cried help. What's out of line is mocking me behind my back while cashing the checks I worked for. What's out of line is typing out a threat and sliding it under my door like cowards." My mom's mouth parted, but no words came out. "I canceled the transfers. All of them," I continued. "The bank is investigating the last one, and if I decide to press the issue, it could become a fraud case. I haven't decided yet." Mia stood up. "You wouldn't. Try me." She stared at me, her jaw tight. "I'm not doing this because I want your money," I said. "I'm doing this because I want you to understand that I'm not yours to use anymore. I was never the weak one. I was just the only one who cared enough to keep giving. That stops tonight." "You're seriously just cutting us off?" my mom whispered, her voice small now. "No," I said. "I'm setting boundaries. What you choose to do with that is up to you." And then, for the first time in my life, I stood up from that table before anyone finished eating. I walked to the door, picked up my tote bag, and let myself out. I didn't look back. That night, my phone buzzed with message after message. First angry, then apologetic, then angry again. I didn't answer a single one. Eventually, the noise stopped. It's been 3 months. I moved to a new place. Smaller town, slower pace. I got promoted recently, started volunteering at a local community center, and even joined a weekend hiking group. I don't check my old messages anymore. I don't need to. Last week, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten this time. From my mom. It was short. "We didn't realize how much we took until you were gone. I'm sorry. For everything. I hope one day you'll come back. Not because we need you, but because we finally deserve you." I read it once. Then I tucked it away. Because forgiveness takes time. And for the first time in my life, I'm not in a rush. My name is Lucas. I'm 25, and last week my life flipped upside down in a way that would almost be funny if it didn't hurt so much. I grew up in a small house in the suburbs with my parents and my younger sister, Emily. We weren't rich, but we got by. My dad worked long hours at a factory, my mom stayed home, and I worked part-time jobs all through college to help cover bills. For years, I've chipped in for groceries, utilities, even car repairs when Dad's old truck broke down. It wasn't out of obligation, it was just what you do when you love your family. But lately, I'd started to feel like they didn't really see me as family. More like a walking wallet. Every time I got paid, it was, "Hey Lucas, we're short on rent," or "Lucas, your sister needs new tires. Can you help?" I'd nod, swipe my card, and tell myself that one day, things would get easier. That one day they'd be proud of me instead of treating me like the backup plan. Then, out of nowhere, my dad bought a lottery ticket. He never plays, said it was a waste of money. But that night he came home with the biggest grin I'd ever seen on his face. "You're looking at a millionaire," he shouted, waving the ticket like it was a golden ticket to Willy Wonka's factory. Mom screamed. Emily jumped up and down, and for a second I felt it too. This rush of relief, like all our problems were finally over. But that's when things started to get weird. The next morning, Dad sat me down at the kitchen table. His tone wasn't joyful anymore. It was cold. "Lucas," he said, "you don't need to keep living here. We don't need your money anymore. In fact, I don't want your dirty money touching this house. Pack your things. You've got until tonight." I just sat there, stunned. I'd been paying their bills for years, keeping this family afloat. And now, when they were finally financially secure, he wanted me gone? Dirty money? I asked, my voice shaking. "What are you talking about?" Dad just shrugged like it was obvious. "You think I didn't notice? You've been acting like some kind of hero, always swooping in to save us. Well, we don't need saving anymore. Get out." Mom wouldn't even look at me. Emily smirked like she'd been waiting for this moment forever. And that's when I saw it. The lottery ticket was still sitting on the counter next to Dad's coffee mug. I picked it up, my heart pounding, and when my eyes landed on the numbers, I burst out laughing so hard that everyone just stared at me like I'd lost my mind. My laughter didn't stop for a good 30 seconds. It wasn't happy laughter, more like the kind of laugh that bubbles out when you're standing on the edge of something unthinkable. The kind that comes out when everything feels so absurd that your brain doesn't know what else to do. "What's so funny?" Emily asked, her voice dripping with irritation. I wiped a tear from my eye and held up the ticket. "Dad, this isn't the winning ticket. Look." His smug grin faltered as I slid it across the table to him. The winning numbers were 0, 4, 0, 9, 16, 23, 32, and 41. "This thing has 0, 2, 11, 15, 24, 30, and 40. You didn't win anything." For a moment, there was silence. Mom blinked, Emily frowned, and Dad's face slowly turned a shade of red I'd never seen before. He snatched the ticket back from me like I'd just stolen it. "You're lying," he snapped. "I checked these numbers last night." "Then check them again," I said, my voice calm but my hands shaking. "You can even pull up the lottery website." He glared at me but grabbed his phone anyway, fumbling with the screen as Mom and Emily crowded around him. I just stood there, my heart pounding in my ears, waiting for the moment it would click. And then it did. His face dropped. Mom gasped. Emily muttered, "Wait, what?" "No," Dad whispered. "No, no, no. This has to be wrong." "It's not wrong," I said quietly. "You didn't win. You threw me out of the house over nothing." That should have been the moment everything snapped back to reality. The moment where Dad would look up, embarrassed, and mutter something about getting carried away. Maybe even apologize. But instead, he doubled down. "Fine," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Even if I didn't win, I still don't want you here. You think you're so much better than us, Lucas. Always acting like we owe you something because you paid a few bills. Well, guess what? We didn't ask you to." I stared at him, stunned. "Didn't ask me to? Are you serious? You called me at work last month crying because you couldn't make rent." Mom crossed her arms. "We were desperate, Lucas. We thought you helped because you loved us, not because you wanted to hold it over our heads forever." "I never held it over your heads," I said, my voice rising. "I just wanted to be part of this family. But apparently that's only true as long as I'm useful to you." Emily scoffed. "Oh, give me a break. You act like you're some kind of saint just because you paid for groceries a couple of times. Big deal. Plenty of people live at home without helping at all." "Yeah, I shot back, like you. You don't have a job, Emily. You've been living here rent-free for years." Her face twisted into a smirk. "That's different. I'm still in school." "You're 22 and you've switched majors 3 times, I said. "When exactly do you plan on graduating?" Dad slammed his hand on the table, making all of us jump. "Enough. I will not have you disrespecting your sister in my house. You're leaving today, Lucas, whether you like it or not." That was it. No apology, no recognition of how much I'd sacrificed, just more accusations and a deadline. I felt something inside me crack. All those years of biting my tongue, working late shifts, giving them every spare dollar I had just so we could keep the lights on, and now I was being kicked out because they no longer needed me. I packed my things in silence. Mom didn't come to my room. Emily walked past my door humming, like she was celebrating. Dad stayed planted in front of the TV, acting like nothing had happened. Every box I filled felt heavier than the last, not because of what was inside, but because of what it represented, my whole life being shoved into cardboard and taken away. When I finally carried the last box out to my car, Dad stood at the door. "Leave the house key," he said. I dropped it in his hand and looked him straight in the eye. "One day," I said, my voice steady, "you're going to realize what you threw away today. And when that day comes, I hope you remember this moment." He didn't say anything. He just shut the door in my face. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. For the next few weeks, I stayed at a friend's apartment, trying to get back on my feet. I picked up extra hours at work, saved as much as I could, and kept telling myself I'd be okay. But then the texts started coming. At first, it was just little things from Mom. "Hey, do you know when the water bill is due?" Or "Emily's car broke down. Any chance you could help?" I ignored them at first, thinking they'd get the hint. But they didn't. The texts became guilt trips. You know we took care of you all these years. The least you could do is help your sister. Your dad's blood pressure is high. He shouldn't have to stress about money right now. I stared at those messages, my hands clenched into fists. They kicked me out, told me they didn't need me, and now they were asking for money again? And then, just when I thought it couldn't get worse, Emily sent me a picture. It was her in front of a brand new car, grinning from ear to ear. "Look what Dad got me," the caption read. I saw red. They were buying her cars while asking me for money. They were treating me like an ATM even after they'd thrown me out. I felt something cold settle in my chest that day. Because if they wanted me out of their lives so badly, they were about to find out what that really meant. I wish I could say I cooled off after Emily's message. That I let it go, focused on myself, and didn't let it eat me alive. But it did. It gnawed at me every single day. Every time I clocked in at work, every time I skipped buying myself lunch to save a few bucks, every time I walked past the display of new phones and reminded myself my cracked screen still worked. The thought that they had thrown me out, bought Emily a brand new car, and were still bold enough to ask me for money made my stomach twist. Then came the moment that really broke something inside me. It was a Friday night, and I was sitting on my friend Evan's couch, finally relaxing after a long week. My phone buzzed, a message from Mom. Normally, I would have ignored it, but something in me hesitated. I opened it. "Lucas, we need you to send $500 tonight. The power bill is overdue and they're threatening to shut it off. Your sister has an important online exam this weekend. Don't let her fail because of you." I stared at that message for a long time. Because of me? They threw me out, told me I wasn't part of the family anymore, and now her failing school was my fault? I didn't reply right away. I put my phone down and tried to focus on the TV, but my chest felt tight. I could almost hear my dad's voice in my head. "We didn't ask you to help all those times." That's when the second message came through. "This is serious, Lucas. If you care about your family at all, you'll help us. We already gave Emily all the money we had for tuition and her car. There's nothing left." That one stung. It was the unspoken truth laid bare. They had spent what little they had left on Emily, and now they wanted me to pick up the slack. Again, I typed out a reply and deleted it 3 times before finally sending. "You kicked me out. Find another solution." I expected that to be the end of it. Maybe a passive-aggressive guilt trip, maybe silence. Instead, an hour later, there was a knock at the apartment door. It was Dad. Evan opened it, startled, and stepped aside as Dad barged in like he owned the place. "We need to talk," he said, his tone low and angry. I stood up, my stomach dropping. "What are you doing here?" "You ignored your mother," he said, glaring at me. "She told you we need money. You're sitting here while your family suffers." "You mean while you buy Emily new cars?" I shot back. His jaw tightened. "She's in school. She needs support. I needed support too," I said, my voice rising. "But you never gave it to me. I worked my butt off to keep that house running, and you kicked me out the second you thought you didn't need me anymore. You were poisoning this family," he snapped. "Always making us feel guilty for accepting your help. You think we didn't notice?" I felt like I'd been slapped. Poisoning the family? "Dad, I kept us from losing the house." "Enough," he barked. "You're giving us $500 tonight. If you don't bother coming around again. You'll regret it." There it was, the line that crossed everything. He wasn't just asking. He was threatening me. Evan stepped forward then, clearly uncomfortable. "Hey, maybe you should go. This isn't the place." But Dad ignored him. He stepped closer until he was right in my face. "You think you're so independent now? Let's see how long you last when you've burned every bridge you have." Something inside me snapped. "Get out," I said quietly. He sneered. "Excuse me. Get out." He glared at me for a long moment, then turned on his heel and stormed out, slamming the door behind him so hard the frame rattled. I stood there, my hands shaking, my chest heaving. Evan put a hand on my shoulder, but didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. Later that night, I logged into my bank account to check my balance, just to reassure myself that I was still okay financially. That's when I saw it. A $500 transfer I hadn't authorized. My heart sank. I clicked through the details and felt the blood drain from my face. It wasn't a transfer, it was a withdrawal from my savings account. Somehow, my parents had accessed my bank account and taken the money anyway. I sat there in stunned silence for a long time. I'd given them access years ago, back when I was still living at home, just in case of emergencies. I'd never thought they would use it against me, but they had. And that was the moment everything changed. Because this wasn't about helping them anymore. This was theft. This was betrayal. This was the people I had trusted most in the world proving that they would take from me, lie to me, and throw me away without hesitation. That night, I closed my account and moved what little money I had left to a new bank. I blocked Mom and Dad's numbers. But inside, I was seething, because they had just started a war. The next few weeks were some of the hardest of my life. For the first time, I felt completely unmoored, like the ground I'd been standing on my whole life had crumbled beneath me. I didn't just lose my home, I lost my family. The people who were supposed to have my back had proven that when push came to shove, they'd rather shove me out the door. I didn't tell Evan what happened with my account. He already felt bad enough letting me stay with him rent-free, and I didn't want to add to his stress. Instead, I kept my head down and threw myself into work. I picked up double shifts, stayed late, and took any overtime I could get. It wasn't enough to distract me completely, though. The anger still simmered under the surface like hot coals. Some nights, after Evan went to bed, I'd sit on the couch staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in my head. Every time Dad asked me for money, every time Mom guilt-tripped me, every time Emily smirked as though she had won some invisible competition. I thought about that slammed door, about Dad's words, "You'll regret it," and my chest would tighten until I felt like I couldn't breathe. But the worst part was the silence. No texts, no calls, nothing from them after they took the money. It was like I had been erased from their lives, except when they needed something. The first week I kept expecting Mom to reach out, maybe to apologize, maybe to explain. By the second week, I realized no apology was coming. By the third, I knew for sure they thought they were right. One rainy night, I decided to drive by the house. I told myself it was just to grab the last few things I'd left in the garage, an old box of tools, some childhood mementos. But really, I think I just wanted to see if they missed me. When I pulled up, the driveway was full. Emily's new car was parked right in the middle like a trophy. The lights were on, and through the living room window, I could see all three of them sitting together, laughing. My mom leaned on my dad's shoulder, Emily gesturing wildly with her hands as she told some story. They looked happy, and it broke me. I didn't go in. I didn't knock. I just sat in my car, watching them through the rain-streaked glass, until the lump in my throat became too much and I had to drive away. Back at Evan's apartment, I stayed up late again, this time with a notebook and pen. I started writing things down, numbers, dates, amounts. All the times I had bailed them out, how much money I had sent over the years, how many hours I had worked to do it. I wanted to see it all on paper. By the time I was done, the total was enough to make me feel sick. Thousands of dollars. Thousands that could have gone toward my own life, a better car, my own apartment, maybe even a vacation. Instead, it had gone to them. And for what? For them to toss me aside the second they thought they had won the lottery. The next morning, I opened my laptop and started looking for a new place to live. It didn't have to be big, just mine. Somewhere I could lock the door and not have to worry about who was going to take my money while I slept. Evan noticed the change in me. "You're quieter than usual," he said one night as we ate takeout on the couch. "I'm just tired," I said. He gave me a look like he didn't believe me, but didn't push. That was the thing about Evan, he didn't pry. He just made space for me to figure things out. And slowly, I started to. I found a tiny one-bedroom apartment about 20 minutes from work. It wasn't much, creaky floors, thin walls, and an ancient stove that made a strange whistling sound. But when I signed the lease, something shifted inside me. For the first time since leaving my parents' house, I felt like I was taking back control. Moving day was bittersweet. Evan helped me carry boxes up the narrow staircase, joking about how I was finally an adult now. I laughed along, but inside I was nervous. This was it. No more safety nets, no more fallback plan. That night, as I sat on the floor of my new apartment eating a sandwich because I hadn't unpacked my dishes yet, I realized I felt lighter. Lonely, yes, but also free. I started working on myself in ways I hadn't before. I set a strict budget, opened a savings account only I had access to, and began reading about personal finance. I got serious about work, volunteering for projects that could lead to a promotion. I even started going to the gym with Evan, just to clear my head. But no matter how much I improved my own life, the anger didn't go away. If anything, it grew sharper with time. Because every time I opened social media, there was Emily posting about some new thing she got, a designer purse, concert tickets, dinner at expensive restaurants. All funded by my parents, of course. And then, one day, I got a message from a mutual friend who still lived in our old neighborhood. Hey, just so you know, your parents have been telling everyone you abandoned them after your dad lost his job. They're saying you refused to help and left them to fend for themselves. I read that message 3 times before it sank in. They weren't just ignoring me. They were rewriting the story to make me the villain. And that was the moment I decided this wasn't just about moving on anymore. If they wanted to tell the world I was selfish, that I was the bad guy, I was going to make sure they understood exactly what selfish really looked like. I didn't know how yet, but I was done letting them write the narrative. When I look back now, I think the moment I signed that lease was the start of everything. It didn't feel powerful at the time, more like a survival move. But once I had my own space, my own set of keys, something in me began to shift. At first, it was just small things. I started keeping a routine. Wake up at 6:30, cook breakfast, pack my own lunch, hit the gym with Evan after work. For years I had been running on fumes, letting exhaustion and guilt run my life. Now, every choice felt intentional. And then opportunities started to appear. About 2 months after moving into the apartment, my manager at work pulled me aside. "Lucas," she said, "I've noticed how much you've been stepping up lately. We have a team lead position opening up next quarter. I think you'd be a great fit." For a second, I just stood there shocked. No one had ever said anything like that to me before, not my parents, not teachers, not anyone. It lit a fire in me. I spent the next few weeks doing everything I could to prove I was worthy of that role. I stayed late, took on projects no one else wanted, and even trained a couple of new hires. By the time the promotion became official, I was ready. The raise wasn't massive, but it was enough to give me breathing room. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was just surviving. I was building something. I used part of the extra money to furnish the apartment properly, piece by piece. A small dining table, a secondhand couch, real dishes instead of paper plates. And with each little improvement, I felt myself growing. I started seeing friends more often. Not just Evan, but people I hadn't had time for back when every paycheck was going straight to my parents. We'd grab dinner, catch a movie, just hang out, and I realized how much of life I had been missing. The gym became a kind of sanctuary for me. At first, I hated it. My arms burned, my legs felt like jelly, and I wanted to quit every 5 minutes. But slowly, I got stronger. I started to see definition in my shoulders, my posture improved, and the constant knot of anxiety in my chest loosened a little more each day. One night, Evan and I were walking back from the gym when he said, "You know, you're different now." I raised an eyebrow. "Different how?" "More? I don't know. Confident. Like you're not just reacting to everything anymore. You're actually living." I smiled at that, because he was right. But it wasn't just about my personal growth. My professional life was changing, too. The projects I had taken on as team lead were going so well that upper management started to notice. I got invited to meetings I'd never been part of before. People started asking for my input, listening when I spoke. And then came the big break. One of our senior analysts went on leave unexpectedly, and I was asked to temporarily take over one of their accounts. It was complicated work, the kind of thing that could make or break your career, but I poured myself into it. Late nights, early mornings, triple-checking everything. When the quarterly results came in, the account had not only improved but exceeded expectations. My manager called me into her office again, this time with the director sitting beside her. "Lucas," she said, smiling, "we're impressed. We'd like to make your role permanent. And there will be a salary adjustment to reflect the additional responsibilities." I left that office in a daze, my heart pounding. I called Evan on the way home, barely able to contain my excitement. By the time I got to the apartment, he already had 2 beers on the counter. "You did it," he said, grinning. "Yeah," I said, grinning back. "I really did." That night, as I sat in my living room surrounded by the quiet hum of a place that was truly mine, I realized something important. I didn't need them anymore. Not their approval, not their validation, not their guilt trips or their manipulation. I was doing fine without them. More than fine, I was thriving. But that's when the first crack appeared in the silence. It was a Sunday morning, and I was sipping coffee by the window when my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Lucas, it's Mom. Please call me. Your dad isn't doing well." For a moment, My heart clenched. Despite everything, they were still my parents. I stared at the message, torn. Then another one came through. We need help with the mortgage. If we lose the house, your sister will have to drop out. Please, just this once. Just this once. I set the phone down and stared out the window for a long time. Because while part of me wanted to rush back, to fix everything like I used to, another part of me, the part that had spent months rebuilding my life, knew better. This wasn't just about money. It was about control. And for the first time, I held all the cards. I didn't reply that day. Instead, I went for a run, pushing myself harder than I ever had before, until my lungs burned and sweat stung my eyes. By the time I got back to the apartment, I knew one thing for certain. Whatever happened next, I wasn't going to let them write the story this time. I was going to write it myself. And if they thought they could guilt me into handing over everything I'd worked so hard to build, they were about to find out just how wrong they were. I didn't respond to Mom's messages right away, but I didn't delete them either. I kept them, letting them sit in my phone like a reminder of the old pattern they were trying to pull me back into. It was tempting, the idea of swooping in, saving the day, being the good son again, but I knew where that road led. I'd walked it before, and it had ended with me homeless, broke, and betrayed. So instead of replying, I went back to my notebook. I had kept every page of the one I started the night I sat in Evan's apartment, adding up all the money I'd given them. Now I began a new one. This one wasn't just about recording the past, it was about planning the future. Step 1. I made sure my financial position was unshakable. I'd been saving steadily since my promotion, but now I doubled down. I cut unnecessary expenses, automated my savings, and even opened an investment account. My company offered a 401k match I had never taken advantage of. I signed up that week. I read books about money management, watched hours of free lectures online, and even spoke to a financial advisor. The more I learned, the angrier I became. Because looking at the numbers, I realized that if I had never given my parents that money, I could already own a small home outright. I could have been years ahead. That anger didn't crush me this time. It sharpened me. It gave me clarity. Step 2. I started documenting everything. Every text, every call, every voicemail. I even asked a couple of old friends to write down what they remembered about all the times I had helped my parents, the nights they had called me in a panic about bills, the times they saw me handing over cash. One of them still had screenshots of messages my mom had sent, thanking me for covering utilities or groceries. I asked her to send them to me. It felt strange, gathering this evidence, like I was building a case. But that's exactly what I was doing. Because deep down, I knew this wasn't just about revenge. This was about protecting myself. If they were willing to drain my account once, what else would they do? What stories would they tell about me to justify it? Step 3. I started paying attention to their financial situation. At first, I didn't care what they were doing. I had blocked them and moved on. But after Mom's message about the mortgage, I became curious. I still had access to some public records from when I used to help pay their bills. I started looking into property tax records, mortgage filings, anything I could legally access. That's when I found out they had taken out a second mortgage on the house shortly after I left. I sat there staring at the document, shaking my head. They had borrowed against the house, probably to buy Emily her car and cover her tuition, and now they were in trouble. And here was the twist of irony that almost made me laugh. If they defaulted, they wouldn't just lose the house. They'd lose the only thing they had that tied them to a middle-class life. It was exactly what they had accused me of threatening them with, except this time, I wouldn't have to lift a finger. Step 4. I began building a new network of allies. I stayed in touch with Evan, of course, but I also reconnected with some extended relatives, people I hadn't seen in years because my parents had always dismissed them as meddlers. One of them, my Aunt Sarah, turned out to be an accountant. Over coffee one afternoon, I told her a carefully edited version of what had happened, leaving out the ugliest details but making it clear I had been financially taken advantage of. She nodded sympathetically and said something I'll never forget. "You don't have to let them do this to you again, Lucas. You have options." When I told her about the second mortgage, she actually winced. "They're digging a hole they can't climb out of," she said. "And if they think you're going to fill it for them, they're in for a rude awakening." She helped me look over my own finances, gave me advice on protecting my assets, and even suggested I consider legal steps if they ever tried to access my accounts again. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't alone. Step 5. I began thinking about timing. I didn't want to just cut them off. That would have been easy, too easy. I wanted them to see me succeed, to see the life I was building without them, to realize, little by little, that they had pushed away the one person who could have been their greatest ally. So I started posting more on social media. Not bragging, just subtle things. A picture of my apartment with the caption, "First place I can really call mine." A photo with my coworkers after a big project launch. Me and Evan at the gym, grinning after hitting a personal best. I wasn't trying to show off. I was reminding them I existed, and that I was doing just fine without them. The messages started to trickle in again after that. Mom first, then Emily. "We miss you. It's been too long. Dad wants to see you." But I wasn't the same Lucas they had kicked out. I didn't reply immediately. I let days pass before sending a simple, neutral response. "I'm busy. Maybe another time." And then one day, completely out of the blue, Emily sent me a message that nearly made me laugh out loud. "Dad said if you come home for dinner this weekend, he'll apologize. He admits he overreacted. It should have been everything I wanted. The thing I had dreamed about on all those lonely nights in Evan's apartment." But instead of feeling relieved, I felt powerful. Because for the first time, they weren't holding the cards. I was. And I wasn't ready to let them off the hook just yet. I didn't go to dinner that weekend. In fact, I didn't go the weekend after that, either. I waited. Slowly, deliberately. Because this wasn't just about hearing Dad say the words, "I'm sorry." This was about shifting the balance of power completely. About making sure they understood what they had done and what it had cost them. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. One afternoon, I got a call from Aunt Sarah. "Lucas," she said carefully, "I think you should know, your parents are behind on their mortgage again. I know you're not involved with them right now, but I thought you'd want to be aware." I thanked her, hung up, and just sat there for a while, staring at my apartment wall. This was it. This was the moment I had been quietly preparing for. I didn't rush into anything. Instead, I doubled down on my planning. I met with Sarah again, and she explained to me exactly what would happen if they defaulted, how long the process would take, what notices they'd get, what options they'd have. She also reminded me that I was under no obligation to step in. That night, I went through all my notes, all my documentation, all my records of what I had given them. I put everything into a single, organized folder, not just for me, but for anyone who might ever try to twist the narrative again. I wanted proof of exactly what I had done for them, and why I was no longer doing it. Then, when I felt completely prepared, I made my move. I texted Mom and told her I'd come to dinner. The reaction was immediate, a flood of happy emojis, exclamation points. Emily will be so excited. Walking up to that house felt surreal. The same house I had been kicked out of months ago, standing there with my car parked in the driveway like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Emily opened the door, smiling, but it looked forced, nervous. Mom hugged me first, too tightly, like she was afraid I might slip away again. Dad was at the table, arms crossed, expression unreadable. We sat down to eat. At first, it was awkward, small talk about work, the weather, Emily's classes. Then Dad cleared his throat. "Lucas," he said slowly, "I need to say something. I was wrong. About a lot of things." I stayed quiet, letting him speak. "I shouldn't have kicked you out. I shouldn't have said what I said about your money. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I see now I wasn't. I'm sorry." There it was, the apology I had imagined so many times. But instead of rushing to accept it, I let the silence hang for a beat. "Thank you," I said finally. "I appreciate that." Mom looked relieved, like she thought that was the end of it. But I wasn't done. I pulled out the folder I had brought with me and set it on the table. "This," I said, "is everything I've given this family over the years. Every rent payment, every grocery run, every emergency fund transfer. I want you to look at it." Mom hesitated, but I opened it for her. Page after page of numbers, receipts, screenshots, printed messages. Emily's smile faltered. Dad's jaw tightened. "This is not to rub it in," I said calmly. "It's to make something very clear. I've done my part. More than my part. I kept this family afloat when no one else could. And you took advantage of that until I had nothing left." Dad didn't say anything, but his face was pale. "So here's where we stand," I continued. "I'm not your enemy. I don't want to see you fail. But I will not bail you out ever again. If you lose this house, that's on you. If Emily drops out of school, that's on you. I will not be your backup plan anymore. The room was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Mom finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "We're behind on the mortgage." "We were hoping." I held up a hand. "I know. And I'm not helping. You made your choice when you kicked me out. You wanted independence from me. You have it." Emily opened her mouth like she wanted to argue, then closed it again. "I hope you figure it out," I said, standing. "I really do. But this is the last time I come here unless something changes." I left the folder on the table and walked out. For the first time in months, I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. And I knew, deep down, that whatever happened next, whether they saved the house or lost it, they would have to face the truth about what they had done. Because I had handed them the mirror, and whether they liked the reflection or not, they couldn't unsee it. Leaving that house was like stepping out of a storm and into clear air for the first time. For weeks, I didn't hear from them. No calls, no texts. I didn't know if they were angry, hurt, or just processing what I'd laid out for them. Part of me thought they might rally and figure things out, but part of me knew they wouldn't. Then, 2 months later, I got the call. It was from Aunt Sarah. "Lucas," she said gently, "your parents' house is going into foreclosure. They missed their last 3 payments. The bank is starting proceedings." I sat there in silence for a long moment. I wasn't surprised, just heavy. "Thank you for letting me know," I said quietly. A week later, Mom texted me for the first time since the dinner. "Lucas, please, we're going to lose the house. We'll have nowhere to go. Emily is devastated. Can you help us, just this once?" I stared at the screen, feeling the weight of the words. Then I typed back. "I already did. For years. This is what you chose when you kicked me out." Her reply came within seconds. "You can't really mean that. This is your family." I took a deep breath before replying. "I do mean it. And I am your family. That's why I gave you everything I had for years. But you threw me out, you drained my savings, and you tried to make me feel guilty for walking away. This is not on me anymore." There was no response after that. The next few weeks were a whirlwind for them. I didn't watch from the sidelines with glee. I watched with a strange mix of sadness and closure. The for sale sign went up in the yard, then came down a month later when the bank took possession. They moved into a small rental across town. Emily posted online about having to drop out of school because of bad luck. I didn't correct her. Instead, I kept focusing on myself. I was promoted again at work, this time into a salaried position. My savings crossed a milestone I never thought I'd see. I traded in my old car for something reliable and new. My apartment, once bare, now felt like a real home, a place I wanted to come back to every night. Then, one Sunday morning, there was a knock at my door. It was Dad. He looked older, somehow. Tired. He stood there for a long moment before speaking. "Can I come in?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. He sat at my small dining table, looking around the apartment like he was trying to understand how I'd built a life here without him. "Finally," he said, "we lost the house." I nodded. "I know." He swallowed hard. "I wanted to say you were right. About everything. I thought I was doing what was best for this family, but I was just angry. And proud. And I hurt you because of it." For a moment, I saw the man I had looked up to as a kid, not the one who had slammed the door in my face, but the one who taught me how to ride a bike, who took me to my first baseball game. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said quietly, "but I wanted you to know I'm sorry." I let the silence sit for a moment. Then I said, "I forgive you, but things can't go back to how they were." He nodded. "I know." We sat there a little longer, not as father and son, but as 2 men who had both been through something and come out the other side. When he left, I stood at the window watching him go. For the first time, I didn't feel that tightness in my chest. That night, I pulled out the last page of my notebook, the one I had left blank on purpose, and wrote down one final line. "They tried to break me, but they built me instead." Then I closed the notebook, set it on the shelf, and turned off the light. And for the first time in a long time, I slept peacefully.